Right.
We've all had the advertisements we've had to see, and we've seen the campaigns change.
You're going to miss those, I know.
We've seen what will happen tomorrow. We've seen the numbers change a lot, but a couple things that I'm watching for tonight. Of course, we have the top of the ticket races, and we're going to be covering as well. And just to tell you that we have a newsroom full of people who are working on getting those results and numbers from the clerk's office, but also going to be looking at the State House and Senate. We're after redistricting. You know, we have all of those seats are up, and to see where the balance of power may end up being tonight.
It's really an important point because with redistricting, we've never seen these races before. So there's a lot left to see how this sorts out. You'll be talking to Richard Zuba, our pollster, who will tell you it's a trickier year to try and make these prognostications for that very reason. So we've got a lot to get to. We've got a studio full of terrific people to talk to. Let me start introducing them. You head over there to Richard, and I'll introduce my wonderful, illustrious group that I have here. Mario Moro, part of the long-time part of the Flashpoint family here at Local 4, political consultant. Caitlin Buss is here, assistant editorial page editor at the Detroit News from Focus Hope, also a constant, a very steady portion of Flashpoint, Portia Roberson. And great to have Mike Bishop back with us again, former congressman who knows a thing or two about election night and sweating things out as you wait for the results to come in. Let's head over to Christy now. We'll talk to this group here in just a minute, but let's head over to Christy, who's with our pollster, Richard.
Yeah, Richard is going to be here with me all night for the next 3 hours, streaming right here on Local 4 Plus. We're so glad that you're with us. And I know, Richard, we have a lot to talk about tonight, looking at numbers, and I would really am excited to get your perspective on everything. But we're going to go out now because we have crews all around the area. Tim Pamplin is live in Ann Arbor for us.
Yeah, hi, Christy. We are outside the University of Michigan Museum of Art. I think the polls are closed at 8 o'clock, but this polling, well, it's a register to vote location in the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, on the campus here, and this line stretches all the way back down there. Several hundred people out here, but another 100 people inside. I saw Debbie Dingle here earlier. She was saying, you know what, Tim, this is what democracy looks like. People turning out, getting their voices heard. Now, all these people here are in line to register to vote. Student body, and they may have been registered in their hometowns around Michigan or around the country, maybe didn't get their absentee ballot, so now they're in line here to get their ballot and make their vote. Got a couple of these people got their tents. Look at this on their blankets. Why is this so important to you?
Just like Prop 3 in general, it's like on the line, women's reproduction rights and abortion rights, and just the right to choose and do what you want. So it's really important us to just vote, and you know, like, it's freedom of speech, freedom of choice. So.
And where's hometown for you?
Rochester Hills.
Rochester Hills?
Yeah, an hour from here. Okay,
well, good luck. You're going to stay in line as long as it takes, I'm assuming.
Yeah. We've been here for like 2.5 hours, so we're willing to wait.
So there you go. As they say, this is what democracy looks like out in Ann Arbor. For now, we'll send it back to you guys in Detroit.
College kids willing to wait 2.5 hours for this. This is going to be the story of the night, is what the turnout is. All right, but the other story of the night is how things are being processed. So let's go to Hank Winchester. He is live at Huntington Place in Detroit. Hi, Hank.
Hey, Christy, good evening to you. We are here inside Huntington Place. This is where the counting has been getting underway throughout the day. In fact, we have some numbers now. We're at about 65,000 absentee ballots that have been counted. They are counting votes cast by people that live within the city of Detroit. Now, here's the good news. They say that they're ahead of schedule. In fact, they believe they're going to have this job wrapped up by the end of this shift. And in fact, the second shift just started a short time ago. They're expected to work until midnight. The other good news is that we haven't really seen any huge voting related issues or problems throughout Metro Detroit. A few glitches here and there, but for the most part, those who went out to vote today have been able to do so successfully. Of course, if you encounter any problems trying to vote, well, we're at 8 o'clock now. So if you'd had any issues, we of course want to hear from you, because we're going to be meeting with the Secretary of State here at 9 o'clock. She's going to be giving us an update, letting us know how things went across the state. The good news here, though, again, from downtown Detroit, is that they are making progress on all those absentee ballots, a record number here in the city. They believe they're going to have this wrapped up and those votes all counted by, we're told, midnight. But of course, we've seen in years past where they make that promise and then sometimes that doesn't play out. Let's get you to my colleague, Mara McDonald, right now. She's keeping an eye on things there. Mara, good evening to you.
Hi, Hank. We're at the Dems headquarters tonight here at the Motor City Casino Hotel. They have not let anybody in here yet. They're going to open the doors in about half an hour. But I will tell you, I've been talking to Democratic operatives who have their various war rooms running throughout this entire hotel. They've been here all day. I will tell you that they feel excited about Governor Whitmer's chances, nervous but excited. Same for Secretary of Benson. What they are concerned about is the state of the AG's race. Lots of nervous tension here about that. Lots of concern specifically Proposal 3 and where it stands right now. But overall, I'd say the feel in this room is hopeful, it's positive, and it is definitely energized. We are, I'm live in Detroit, but my colleague Grant Herms is on the west side of the state with the Dixon campaign. Hi, Grant.
Hey, Mara. Yeah, we're here at the JW Marriott in Grand Rapids, and where the Dixon campaign is holding their watch party here. Now, we are waiting for her to come out. The excitement here in this room, about maybe 200, 300 people so far. The excitement here is up. Right now, they've been watching other candidates from across the country in those races, some of them getting called, some cheers here for Florida governor, who just was called, at least on Fox News, which they're watching here for Ron DeSantis. So a lot of excitement here. We're waiting for the candidate. Not sure quite yet when we're getting to see her or hear from her. We're expecting that in just a little bit. We're going to go now to Rod, who is Rod Maloney for us, who is in Novi at the other end of the Michigan Republican Watch Party. Hey, Rod.
Yeah, good evening, Grant. Yes, we are here at the Suburban Showplace Collection in Novi, and we're here with the Michigan Conservative Coalition. They're the ones that have sponsored this evening's party. About 2 minutes ago, the doors opened, and a fairly sizable crowd came in. We're told that this is going to be one of the larger parties in the state. They say that they're going to be inviting a lot of the election poll workers to come out here, and they're saying that this party is going to go right up until midnight tonight. So far, we're told that Matt DePerno, the Attorney General candidate, and Christy Caramo, the Secretary of State candidate on the Republican side, are both here. We expect to hear from them at some point tonight. Meshawn Maddock, the Republican co-chair, is also here. She was in here earlier inspecting the operation. They put up the balloons and the festivities. They've got food and so forth. And so they're expecting quite the party here tonight. And as things stand, there's a fairly good mood in here. Nobody has any real numbers to go by just yet. So we're going to have to see where this all goes. But that is it. And Christy, we'll send it back to you here from Novi.
Sounds good, Rod. We'll check in with our team in just a little bit. Richard Juba joining me now, our longtime pollster. So we're now in process, and there haven't been any real problems. And then you saw that line of students waiting to register to vote after 8 o'clock at night. What is the big theme that you're taking out of tonight?
Turnout. Turnout, turnout, turnout. That's what's going to decide all these races right now. I mean, I've been looking at this for 40 years in Michigan. I haven't seen students waiting in line like that. And we heard that student say, it's about Proposal 3. So the question I have is, we have two waves crashing into each other. This anti-democratic Republican wave for a midterm, and we have this abortion wave. Which wave is going to be stronger, or do they nullify each other? I'm going to be fascinated to find out.
Fascinated of the demographics of the turnout as well. Devin, let's send it back on over to you.
I can't help but giggle a little bit. The college student approached at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's today. Let's go get this. Let's go get registered. I'm always mindful that there are 4 counties in Michigan where the polls are not closed for another about 50 minutes or so. Dickinson, Iron, Menominee, and Gogebic up in the UP where they are in the central time zone. But polls closing everywhere else across the state, but there are lines everywhere else too. My panel's raring to go here. We're going to talk to them in just a second. Let's take a quick break. We will continue with our coverage of midterm election night in Michigan 2022.
Oh, hey.
Aren't we taking a break? I was told we were taking a break.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our special coverage of Decision 2020 on Local 4 Plus. I'm Jason Colthorpe over at the big board tonight. And in the commercial break there, we're getting our first batch of numbers coming in. And it's not a lot. We'll let you look at these, and I'll just kind of walk you through what we're going to be doing tonight as we look at the big board. But first of all, right now we're getting numbers from Oakland County, and also we're getting numbers from Muskegon County, both swinging the Democratic side, but those are hard blue numbers right now. Throughout the evening, we'll hit that button to show you that it's a lot more shades of gray, actually pink and light blue as it goes on. But right now we have those. Now, just to kind of piggyback on some of the things you've heard already, we're talking about same-day voting. We're hearing from Ingham County tonight where the clerk's saying hasn't seen same-day registration like this in a long time. That's creating some long lines, and we're going to be having people vote way past 8 o'clock tonight. You just saw Ann Arbor, where college students are getting same-day registration. My daughter goes to Grand Valley. That's over in Ottawa County. Same thing. She's registered in her home county, but at school didn't get the absentee ballot in, was able to get the ballot today, get out and go vote. And that's why you're seeing a lot of these college kids who maybe didn't think it all the way through, but they are in line getting their votes counted. So we'll be doing this tonight. We'll check the governor's race, the attorney general's race, secretary of state, the House races, and of course, Prop 1, 2, and 3. We'll also do some quick comparisons to what happened in 2018 versus the presidential race. A lot to cover as we go county by county. For now, we'll send it back over to you, Devin.
They're getting it figured out. They've got tickets for the Ohio State game in a couple of weeks, but we'll work at this one thing at a time. All right, let's bring in the panel here to talk about their reflections so far. Mike Bishop, Portia Roberson, Caitlin Buss, and Mario Moro. Let's start out with just if turnout is as robust as it clearly is, and if it is perhaps we're headed for a record turnout for a midterm, some of these numbers start to look more like a general election. Mike, advantage who?
It's a good question. At the top of this show, we talked about the waves crashing against each other, and it depends on which is stronger. I actually think that if you look at 2016 and that general election, that surge came at the end, and that benefited the Republicans. It's a midterm election. Historically, we've seen it go against the incumbent president. I would expect that a big number this time will be in favor of the Republicans.
True, Portia. Midterm elections aren't usually good for the party in power, but midterm elections don't usually have the Roe versus Wade decision backstopping them either. What do you think of the turnout? What does that lead you to think is happening?
I think it's going to be good for Democrats. I'm because, listen, I was completely concerned.
You weren't invited here to agree, you two, so that's all right.
Well, when I got up this morning to go vote, I was worried, obviously, about turnout, right? Turnout, especially in places like Detroit, where we know it's highly Democratic, and if they don't turn out, we're in trouble, right? I got to my polling place about 9:30. There was a line outside the door. I don't think I've ever seen a line at that time of the day waiting to vote. They had brought in, I think, 2 or 3 other machines because they had such a line early on before people got to work that they knew that they needed to bring in other machines to help. If that continues in places like even in some parts of Oakland County, that'll be good for Democrats.
Janice Winfrey, her original projection on the Detroit vote wasn't a lot,
right?
Like 30% or so, which I think led to some Democratic leaders thinking that could be trouble, but this would seem to be higher, that given what you just described, a little bit higher than that.
Yeah, and then, we've been hearing all night about absentee votes that are already coming in. And so, those are good numbers for Detroit. I mean, if you've been watching Detroit elections for a long time, I think they had already counted like 65,000 or something like that. Like, there have been times when that might be all that voted, right? So to hear that those are already being voted and those are in Detroit, that sounds good for us.
Caitlin, Detroit News, by the way, and Local 4 partners in the Glenn Gariff and Richards polling, and we've been following this motivation to vote at pretty much an all-time high, really pegging the meter. What do you think that this is telling us about what does all this lead to?
I don't remember an election where so much has been at stake. And so I think you've seen that reflected in the spending, too, especially on these proposals in the last few weeks. There's a great motivation out there on both sides. Prop 3 has activated people on both sides. I think Democrats perhaps overplayed their hand a little too soon in this one, and the momentum really has been on the right side, just upping awareness of the proposal. There's been a real effort on that side. So we'll see if it turns out in the polls here today. I think Democrats had the advantage going in, certainly.
We shouldn't suggest that motivation to vote over Prop 3 was just in one direction. There was a reason to get out and vote against it too, right? Yeah.
And then all the other issues, education, inflation, top of mind, and voters are very concerned about things going on in their daily lives. They're struggling with real issues. So I think there's a lot of motivation out there. The college vote is a very interesting phenomenon. I don't know that that'll translate into really hard numbers that'll turn races, but it is interesting to see the passion there.
It is. It's passionate. That's maybe creating the voters of tomorrow in a new way. Mario, what are your thoughts about looking at this enthusiasm?
Yeah, coming into this, I thought that the AV vote was going to be very powerful. You had 1.7 million people filling those applications out and getting those ballots. And then I thought women were going to make the deciding factor as it relates to the election, like they mostly have in the past, but overwhelmingly because of Prop 3. The college student factor is a new dilemma. I know the Democrats have played very hard to the college campuses. The governor was at Michigan State pounding that pavement, get out and vote. And I think that Prop 3 is going to make that decision with those guys. I don't think they're more in tune with inflation, if you will, or crime. But I know that the younger kids, if they're going in there for Prop 3 and the edge with the liberal factor with college students, I think the edge goes to Democrats. And I do want to add one more thing. What Janice Winfrey did say, and our condolences to her husband who passed away a few days ago, when she talked about low voter turnout in Detroit, I think that was a motivating factor, not only for Detroit and Wayne County, but across the state. When she said that, those numbers started going up for people going.
Whistles and buzzers started
voting.
going off.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I said to Richard during our earlier afternoon newscast, I'm pretty sure that the surge on the college campuses wasn't because they suddenly wanted to get out and affect the state Senate race.
Right, exactly.
But Richard also pointed out to me that at the last check, Richard, it was 12,500, right? 12,500 same-day registrations. Now, if that doesn't sound like a lot when we're talking about millions of votes, just keep in mind that Donald Trump won the state of Michigan by a little bit less than that margin back when he did in 2016. We're going to take a quick break. Got a lot more to talk about, obviously. So many things and repercussions as we continue to go through here. Polls have only been closed here for most of the state for a little less than 20 minutes, but they're not closed because people are in line. We'll continue with more on election night.
And welcome back to our live streaming coverage of election night right here on Local 4 Plus. I'm Christy McDonald. Thanks so much for joining us alongside Richard Juba, who is our pollster. Richard, we have a little QR code on the screen right now. So if you want to take a shot of that, and you can get election results as it's coming into us right now. And so it keeps you in tune with everything that we're getting into our newsroom right now. Richard, I want to ask you said you are watching Muskegon County. Why?
Muskegon has this remarkable track record of predicting the right winners in Michigan. Used to be Kalamazoo County did a great job, but then we had a political realignment of the parties. Suddenly it's Muskegon and Saginaw counties. They will tell us the story of what's happening statewide tonight.
A little bit of mid-Michigan, a little bit of the west side of the state. All right, let's head on out to Tim Pamplin, who is in Ann Arbor with those students that we keep talking about, the young vote. Hi, Tim.
Yeah, Christy. Yeah, hi, Christy. We are at the University of Michigan Art Museum. This is a satellite setup for the Secretary of State's office. Vote early, the sign says. Well, these are students being students. They left it to the last minute. We're going to just follow around here. Some of these students have been waiting here up to 6 hours to get to vote. Now, I can't show you what's going on to my left. That's the polling place. Behind me is where they get the ballots, do their voting. This is where you get the line to register to vote. As we make our way around here, several hundred, maybe close to 300-400 people in line here. As we make our way outside, excuse me, it gets a little crowded here. But people from across the state, from across the country, are students here at the University of Michigan. And they're exercising their democratic right to vote, to register. The rules are that if you're in line to register to vote, you're in line to vote. So to make our way outdoors here, and we look back here, you can see the line stretches all the way back down there. These are students at the University of Michigan exercising their democratic right to cast their vote in this pivotal election. A lot of students here saying Prop 3 is their reason to be here, reproductive rights. Back to you guys downtown.
Yeah. You know what, Tim, thanks so much. I think that we're really just stunned looking at the pictures, and sometimes, you know, we can get a little jaded talking about politics, and, you know, here we are, election night, and there's been a lot of negative ads, and but to be able to sit here and be like, this is the night where we get to have our say, and people waiting in line to have that say is makes me feel good, Richard.
Hey, it's great to see young people voting. It's always been the challenge. Hey, they're in line, they're voting. Nobody can claim they're not doing their part.
All right, we're going to send it over to you, Devin.
Well, I wanted to get back to the panel here and ask each of you what you are really wanting to watch tonight. I mean, obviously the top of the ballot races are getting all the attention, but I know that politicos like yourselves are looking at other things of intrigue. Mike, let me start with you.
Boy, that's a tough question because I have my roots in the state Senate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm watching the state Senate race very closely, and where that goes, I'm also in tune with what's going on in the gubernatorial race here.
Let me just to set the table quickly on the state Senate. It's been in Republican hands since 1984, and there's some thought that through redistricting, that could change tonight.
It's not going to be it's not going to be a slam dunk for the Republicans, so that'll be interesting to watch. The House is also not exactly a slam dunk either. The gubernatorial race will, I think, play a big role as to where the state races go. But I'm also very interested to see what happens in Congress and whether or not the state or the United States House flips, and to what degree it flips.
Looks difficult for Democrats to hang on to the House. Sure. Senate, we'll see what happens, but tall order given the margin portion. What are you watching tonight?
Well, shockingly, I'm looking at congressional races tonight. I'm really interested. I've had little up close and personal, so I'm really interested in congressional races this time around. Slotkin's race. I'm interested in Kildee's race. I'm interested in the narrative that for the first time, Michigan may send a black Republican to Congress and not a black Democrat to Congress. Right. Detroit, or two or
possibly,
three.
Possibly three.
That's right.
That's right.
Right. So those are the races I've been watching, keeping my eye on. The slot are the most expensive races in the country. So it's really going to be interesting to see, if not the most, to see how that shapes out. Kildee has been a long-standing name in Flint, and to see how that might flip.
His uncle before him. So if he were to lose, it'd be the first time, I think, in 45 years there wouldn't be a Kildee in Congress.
Yeah, so there's some interesting congressional races, not only across the country, but in Michigan.
How about you, Caitlin?
So I'm interested in, I have a feeling there's going to be a mixture of parties at the top of the ticket at the end of the night. And so I'm interested in what that means for Michigan moving forward. I'm also interested in these congressional races. They're kind of fun and exciting, and they're fun to watch. But I'm also interested in Macomb and Oakland counties and how they vote and what that means for the state and what it means for Michigan as a purple state moving forward and how that looks.
And how about you, Mark?
And I would have to agree with all the other panelists. But I'm also especially looking at the AG race. I want to see what's going to happen with that smart millage.
That might be the mixed ticket that Caitlin was talking about.
I think she's alluding to that, but still too early. But the smart millage and also the James Marlinga race, particularly. See how that turns out.
Gets back to what we were talking about. We're kind of dancing on both sides of the dance floor. I'm moving over to the broadcast side here. If you'll follow me, you guys hang on. I'll be back. No, you guys stay put. We'll come back over here where Kimberly Gill is waiting. Yes, and we're going to be joining the broadcast side in just a minute with an update. Our first one on the Local 4 side since the polls closed about 26 minutes ago. So hang on just a second, friends, over there on Local 4 Plus. And now... And welcome to our special coverage of Decision 2022 as Michigan and the entire country cast their ballots.
Polls closed at the top of the hour. The time now 8:26 p.m. and those votes are now being counted. As the night progresses, we will bring you the latest updates on air and online. Here's a look, though, first at some of the early results coming in.
And keep in mind, this is very, very early in the evening. Only 1% of the vote in so far. And this is a good time to mention, we know a lot of people are still waiting in line to cast votes. So even though the polls are closed, the voting itself is not. 67% right now for the incumbent Gretchen Whitmer, but again, just getting started with the counting.
Yeah. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson running for re-election as the state's top election official. She's being challenged by former community college instructor Christina Caramo. Caramo is a 2020 presidential election denier and is endorsed by former President Trump. You see there again, very early in the night of voting, but Jocelyn Benson ahead 72% of the votes, but only 1% of precincts reporting.
The closest race of the statewide races, at least according to the polls, has been that for Attorney General. Incumbent Democrat Dana Nessel in a very heated race with the Republican challenger Matt DePerno. This one is being watched all over the country tonight, too.
And this one, too. Michigan voters making a big decision on Proposal 3. That would put a woman's right to abortion and use of contraceptives in the state constitution.
All right, let's check in now with both camps in the race for governor.
Yeah, Grant Herms is in Grand Rapids with the Dixon campaign, but we're going to begin with Mar McDonald. She's live at Motor City Casino in Detroit with the Whitmer camp. Mar.
Hi, Kimberly. You know, this is really going to be the entire top of the Dem ticket here at Motor City Casino. And I will tell you, I've been talking to Democratic operatives all day. They feel good about the governor's race. They feel good about the Secretary of State's race. They have trepidation about the AG's race, and they are concerned. That said, I will tell you, we're starting to see early numbers roll out of Oakland County for those who are interested. But I think everybody here realizes there are a tremendous amount of votes to count, and it is going to be a long night. So we are live in Detroit at the Motor City Casino Hotel. My colleague Grant Herms is across the state with Tudor Dixon's camp. Hi, Grant.
Hey, Mara, good evening. We are here in Grand Rapids where the Dixon campaign is hosting their election night watch party. It's sort of a homecoming build watch party for her hometown, Norton Shores, up in Muskegon County. About 200, 300 people here so far. We haven't seen Tudor Dixon, but we have seen her Lieutenant Governor running mate, Shane Hernandez, milling around here, talking to some people. The big thing tonight people are watching is how women will turn out in this race. A historic race, 2 women at the top of the ticket, something that we should be talking a lot about tonight. A lot of excitement here. We're waiting to hear from Tudor Dixon. Hopefully in a little bit here. We're working with the campaign to see if we know when she'll be talking to the crowd that's gathered here. But for now, they are watching the returns come in from across the state. There's very early numbers. One of the things, too, if you're watching Local 4 Plus, our pollster, Richard Zuba, saying that he was watching Muskegon County, which is Dixon's home county right now. Governor Gretchen Whitmer has that lead there, but we are very, very early on in this race, and everyone here hunkering down, just like they are in Detroit, for a very long night. Devin, Kimberly, back to you.
That's so right, Grant. Because of this enormous volume that we've had of absentee ballots, those are going to be counted last in most places. Detroit counting them first this go around, but that's going to perhaps delay some of these results. We could be well into the shank of the morning or even into tomorrow in some of these races.
We're prepared, though, and we'll be here.
Sleeping bags at the ready. We've got much more to come. We'll be back here in 30 minutes with another update.
And head over to clickondetroit.com and Local 4 Plus for more coverage. Great.
In fact, right about now. Kim, I'll be back to you in a bit. Yes, let's get back to the panel here. And I would like to stay with the conversation that we just had there a little bit about this Attorney General's race. Mike, this has been fascinating. We have in Matt DePerno a guy who theoretically could be disbarred anytime. He's under investigation by the Attorney Grievance Commission as well as a special prosecutor, and yet he is and hasn't had very much money to spend on this race at all, and yet polls have had him neck and neck with Dana Nessel.
Well, I think that has a lot to do with the fact that Dana Nessel is not exactly without her issues and controversy. But who's to say that, this is we were just talking about this. This is the highest law enforcement officer in the state.
Yep.
It's a rather important position, and I hope that the people of the state get it right.
I'm not going to ask you. Should I ask you what getting it right means?
I would think that they would go for law and order and a attorney general that believes in the rule of law and defends the Constitution. That's what I believe. And I think the people of the state will recognize how important those issues are and choose the right person.
Portia, I'm going to assume that you would think rule of law means respecting the results of the 2020 election.
That would be a start. That's a place to start. The bar is pretty low. So I think that's if we start there. Listen, I think what has worked to Matt DePerno's advantage is that nobody knows really too much about him. And since people don't know that much about him, they don't know that he is possibly going to be disbarred within a few months. They don't know that he may have physically assaulted a client in a courtroom. Like, they don't know these things, right? And so that has helped him, because when people don't know, they see two sort of even candidates that they should be considering, right? The other thing is, and I think you can't dismiss this, Dana is not warm and fuzzy. I've known Dana a very, very long time. I practiced law. She was a prosecutor. I was a defense attorney. Then I joined the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. And as a woman, I have had people tell me, Portia, you're not warm and fuzzy. Certainly when I was seeing you, I don't see that in myself at all. I think I'm very warm and fuzzy. But I think that has been a challenge for her, particularly compared to some of the other women that are running, particularly to the other candidates, even on the Democratic side, that seem a little bit more approachable than Dana. And I think that has hurt her. If you've noticed, even in her ads recently, I think the very first one she ran, she was sort of more hardcore. She was in front of Frank Murphy Hall of Justice, and the ad started to soften up in the last few weeks. It was like the filter came on, and she looked a lot softer and approachable in a way that they were trying to make sure that people saw someone, particularly a woman, because this is always the challenge for women running for office, that they could approach.
I'll be the one to say that we seldom say that guy just isn't warm and fuzzy. We don't say that about men very often.
Right.
Hey, one thing, though, that's been interesting, when you look at just how vulnerable Dana Nessel is, and if elections in Michigan are always decided by the independents, if the Republican Party had chosen Tom Leonard to run against her, she would really be in trouble, I think, wouldn't she?
It would be a very different ball game. I think Matt DePerno's success is largely on Dana Nessel's lack of success. I mean, even among voters, if a month ago, 40% of people didn't know who she was, and so that's her wrongdoing. I think on her job performance, she's had a lot of questionable. She's politicized the office. She's acted, questionably at certain times. She's also, during COVID, targeted a lot of people, or it seemed that way to them, whether she was doing that or not. So I think on the job performance front, she has a lot of disadvantages, and so that's why DePerno has succeeded as much as he has. I don't know that it's to his, outstanding qualifications.
Even in communities, Mario, that I might expect to support Dana Nessel, there's not a lot to show on Flint.
Yeah, and I think that it all goes back to what the panelists are saying. It's a lack of name recognition as it relates to successes. There have been some wins, but when there's a win, then it's 3 or 4 steps back, maybe by a mistweet or in another issue that has brought some bad attention to her. But the whole thing about her opposition, being an election denier, being a person who doesn't believe that there was an insurrection, it kind of balances it out. But again, this election will be determined on the number of people who come out to the polls for Proposal 3 and also it may shift over to the Democratic Party. She may be in trouble only because she's at an even point now, but I believe she's still going to come out victorious.
We'll see. Proposal 3, there's so much, the Monday morning quarterbacking and digging into these numbers and what drove people to the polls and then how it affected how they voted in other races is really going to be
I
fascinating.
don't think I want an attorney general who's warm and fuzzy anyway.
and any credit she built up with the election, she took away from herself by saying she wants a drag queen in every school. I mean, just as a political point, it hurt her. That hurt her a lot.
I'm sure she loves hearing that ad run as often as it has, no doubt. Let's get back over to Jason Colthorpe real quick here and see what the results that are starting to trickle in here as the polls now. We got 35 minutes or so into this, Jason.
They really are coming continuous now, Devin, and even after the broadcast update we just had, those numbers were updating as you were on the air. And this is statewide. Let me just tell you what this number up in the corner you're looking at is. We got one precinct reporting now, 4690 precincts in Michigan, 31 of them are in. This 3% of the estimated vote total, that's an unofficial number put together by the Associated Press and others doing some homework on how many they expect to come in. So this 165, and it just jumped again now, about 220,000 now. We just got a big jump in numbers. So now is expected to be 5% of the estimated total vote. That's what you have statewide for governor, with Governor Whitmer out to a 44,000 vote lead. The majority of that, though, in Oakland County, which she won handily the last time around in Oakland County. The last governor's race, she won by 17 points over Bill Schuette, so no surprise there. Michael mentioned the county he was curious about, Muskegon County. Only a few numbers here, but it's 52-47. Again, that's also a county that went the governor's way last time by 10 points. So very interesting there. Let's quickly run you down some of the other big races. We just heard you talking about the Attorney General's race, about 200,000 votes in here. Dana Nessel with a 40,000 vote lead there. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson with an early lead. And again, like you guys say, very early. One precinct officially reporting 5% of the estimated total. And let's hit the props real quick, starting with Prop 3. About the same amount of votes in right now. The yeses out to an early lead there. Let's check Prop 2, which is the promote the vote prop. No out in for, obviously there's hardly any votes coming in on that one. Same with Prop 1. We'll get back to those when we have some harder data. But in the meantime, that's where things stand at the moment. Keeps changing. We'll keep updating you all night long. Christy, Richard?
Thanks so much, Jason. You look at those numbers in Oakland County, they are able to process quicker because they're able to do that electronically by modem. And because it's done and certified through the federal elections. So that's probably why we're seeing a lot of those results come in. But I want to talk to you, Richard, about what we're talking about, like maybe a red mirage or a blue mirage when we start to see numbers early and jumping out. So you have done a lot of polling and looked at that usually Democrats skew more absentee.
Correct.
And that takes longer to count, that maybe people who are going into the polling places maybe skew more Republican, which is sometimes why we see those numbers come up a little different. So talk to us a little bit about why we might see some differences.
Sure. Since Michigan passed a 2018 constitutional amendment for no reason absentee, we've been watching who votes absentee. And increasingly in the polling we are seeing this year, it is wildly disproportionately Democratic in that absentee vote. And so what that tells us is because the state law in Michigan says clerks cannot run those absentees, they take much longer to process. You have to verify the ballot, you have to pull them out, you have to run them through the machine. So those come last in the evening. That's what we mean by the red mirage. The first votes coming in are the election day votes. And those are disproportionately, or should be disproportionately, Republican. And then the blue votes come in. We saw this happen in 2020, where we saw Donald Trump with a lead here in Michigan, and then all of a sudden, Joe Biden came roaring back. It's because those absentee votes came in. Same thing's going to happen here. What I'm watching for in these numbers is exactly, are those early votes, those election day votes, who are they breaking for? And Tudor Dixon, if she's going to make this a race, needs to be winning those early votes.
And I think it's really interesting because we are also kind of putting our arms around what the process is when you are processing 2 million absentee ballots. So 2.1 million were asked for, 1.83 we heard the latest numbers were actually turned back in. And even though the legislators said, hey, here's some extra processing that you can do, you can take off the strip, but then you can't process any further until Election Day. A lot of municipalities are not taking advantage of that. So we are going to be seeing later numbers. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong. It means that the process is just taking place.
We need to wait for all those absentees to be counted. And we've talked about this in every election, I think. States like Florida and Ohio and Georgia, they are allowed to process those absentees ahead of time. That's why they report their numbers so quickly out of Florida. We could do that here, but the legislature won't let the clerks do it.
And it brings us to what will the legislature look like after tonight? Stay with us for more of our election night coverage. We'll be right back.
This is Tim Pamplin on the campus of the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Hundreds and hundreds of people in line now waiting to register to vote. Students have been telling me they've been in line up to 6 hours earlier in the day. Now that's when there was just one clerk inside. Now there are about 4 or 5 clerks inside registering all these young students to vote. After they've been registered to vote, they then go into a polling area inside the museum behind me, cast their ballot. A lot of the students here are saying Prop 3 is what's getting them out here this evening. Back to you guys downtown Detroit.
All right, Tim, we'll be back there shortly. It really is amazing to watch what we're seeing play out because we found ourselves having this conversation in the newsroom earlier. We know that if you're in line to vote, at 8 o'clock, you get to vote. What if you're in line to register? I think it's still the same because you're registering for an absentee ballot. I think they look to be still honoring if you're in line at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, it seems like they're honoring it. I'm wondering if you go in.
Let my attorneys weigh in here on this.
And then have to get in another line to vote, or
we're
do you
hearing
register and
that.
vote right at the same time? Because if you're registering in that line and you then have to flip over and get in another line to vote, they're going to be there a long time tonight.
That might be the case.
The answer is there's going to be a lawsuit tied to this right after the election.
Well, in fact,
that's one way or another.
We've seen the field being fertilized for complaints about how all of this goes. We had this crazy lawsuit, Mike, that Christina Caramo filed, seeking to have all Detroiters have to go vote in person, but nobody else. Judge Kenney threw that out, but that kind of lays I think there's a little bit of, we've got this election integrity force and fund out of Troy that has employed an army of people to go out and challenge as the counting goes on tonight, right?
I think there's just a lot of skepticism about the current state of affairs to election. The kind of faith and confidence that the citizens had for our election process is not there anymore. And this looks like an overcorrection, when you file lawsuits like that. It's a classic overcorrection, but it exemplifies the feeling of the electorate right now. They just don't trust this process. And they've seen a lot of examples of why they don't trust it. And
but how many cases in court? How many?
No, I'm not saying that it's the right thing.
Right. How many?
I'm just telling you that's why.
Oh no, I get it. I get it.
And I think that it's going to take a lot for us to get back to a place. Now, for example, you look at these folks lined up, students lined up. First thing that comes to my mind is they don't live on campus. They live at home. Are they registered at home? And are they now trying to register on campus?
Kayla and I were talking about that. We're assuming this goes back to the change in 2018 with the absentee. Any reason absentee, you can just show up and ask for an absentee ballot as long as you're a Michigan. we hope it's. We don't know. Yeah, this is not. Yes, that's what we're assuming.
But you see, this is part of that concern that people have. They see this kind of thing go on, and it just makes them question how the system works. It used to be that we'd show up to we'd mark off the day. It was a special day. You'd go in and you'd vote. My dad would put a suit on and take us in, and we'd vote. And it was a big deal. It was ceremonial because that's the kind of thing you do as an American. You vote on that day.
But you also, as an American, allow people who are qualified and able to vote, because that's how this democracy works. And if those students are lined up, willing to express their right, then we should allow them to express their right by vote. I don't care where they live or what they're doing. They should be able to register, they should be able to vote, and they should be able to participate in this democratic process.
I certainly would never stand in the way of someone who's qualified to vote, and every American has a right to vote. That's not my point. I'm just telling you that there's been such a sea change in the way we do vote that it causes a concern with the regular person out there who doesn't understand when he can vote, how he can vote. I mean, you're supposed to close the polls at 8 o'clock. How can you register? And
of course, this is what I said to Matt DePerno on Flashpoint a couple of months ago, though. You know, when he talks about, well, we've got to instill confidence in these elections again, I'm like, well, but you're the one who's taking the confidence away by expressing doubts about elections that have been
decided.
And the 2020 election is by now the most litigated, recounted, audited, adjudicated election probably in the history of the world. But this is, in fact, earlier this afternoon, Donald Trump on Truth Social put out a thing that said that they were hearing that there was people were showing up trying to vote in Detroit and being turned away because they had already absentee voted. Jocelyn Benson put out a tweet saying that's not true, that's not what's happening. But this narrative is really a tough fire to put out.
And I love Detroit, but what is Trump's fascination with Detroit? And why does he keep targeting us as the place that he tries to come after? The truth of the matter is, though, like you said, it's been relitigated. And while I understand that because there have been changes in laws and how people can vote, people may be confused and they want to question that. The fact of the matter is that if anything should have restored confidence in elections, it's the fact that the 2020 election was relitigated so many times that they said there was no big fraud that happened here. Mm-hmm. And instead, I question what can we possibly do if there is this legitimate concern about having confidence in the election? What do they ask of the people who are deciding or who are in the Secretary of State's offices and all of that, to make them feel confident once again? Because to me, what it really comes down to is the only way they're going to feel confident is if their person gets elected. That's the only way that they can feel confident again in how elections are run.
That election happened in the, pardon me, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
That election happened in the pandemic too. So there was all kinds of other issues involved in that. There were that were just kind of ruling as they go, and despite certain state laws, because that's what they felt they had to do to ensure that people could vote.
It was a very complicated, and that's when I tell people that election looked like most of the other elections that I've covered over the years, with the exception of all the absentee. That really did make for an extraordinary thing. Funny thing, Caitlin, Republicans used to own the absentee voting. They've given it up now. Maybe, in fact, I kept seeing people in Republican rallies saying, don't vote absentee. And I think telling people not to vote is an unusual strategy. But perhaps to their detriment, they've ceded that ground, don't you think?
Yeah, and I think that Democrats have had a different view of voting, even as much as a decade in the past, too. I mean, this has all been very muddled. I think, on this election denial issue in general, Democrats almost united the Republican Party in an astounding way on this by overplaying it to the extent where people did not feel heard, I think is what Mike is trying to point to. It's not just about 2020, it's not just about Trump. These are concerns they have underlying all of that, and they just kind of want to feel heard. I think that's where that frustration is coming from. So to the extent where Democrats have focused on 2020 again, and Trump himself and some of these MAGA Republicans have hurt themselves in that way, but a lot of people are ready to move on. Yeah. And the election denial is just something, that they've moved on from. And Democrats keep bringing it back. I think that's where you're seeing a little bit of this push and pull frustration, maybe.
It's hard for a lot of journalists to move on because we feel like our work is being, so completely shredded. We got a lot more to come here. Let's see, about 10 more minutes. The polls will close in those final 4 counties up in the UP, but the voting and counting is underway tonight in Michigan, and we'll continue to follow it here on Local 4 Plus. Take out your smartphone, scan this QR code, and that will take you to live election results that are continually being updated here at Local 4. But welcome back to our special coverage of Decision 2022. Got just a couple minutes before we go back over to the broadcast side, and you'll get to watch that choreography again, our dance as I get back over to the broadcast side. Yeah, love it, love it. I wanted to get back to what we were just talking about, because you make a very fair point. As exhausted as I am of defending the 2020 election as a legitimate one, you make a fair point. Until we can address and assuage whatever those fears are, however, to me, unfair they are, we're never getting everybody back together.
Sure. I think the voters determine the issues, you know, and so as much as there's been an effort to dictate what those issues are, or they've kind of happened in the political environment, voters are still speaking about what they care about, and that's what we looked at in our endorsement process. You know, there were a lot of hard calls to make there, but really, you know, looking at the agenda moving forward and what voters care about and how we can move this country to a better place and a more responsible place was our aim in what we looked at.
I said on Flashpoint this past week, Mara, I have a crisis of confidence, of imagination in trying to figure out what brings us back together as a nation. Tonight, I keep saying, tonight's election is going to decide things, it's not going to settle them.
Right. And I don't think that we're going to get over or come together anytime soon, especially when the former president makes an announcement that he's got a major announcement coming, and everyone's assuming that he's going to announce that he's going to run for re-election.
Has he stopped running?
He's never stopped running. And he will never stop saying that the election was stolen. And that's why this issue will continue.
We can't tamp that
just
down.
roll and roll and roll. And we'll just continue fighting each other over this one issue.
Mike, can you see us coming back together around
It's
anything?
got to be the 2024 election.
I was about to faint. Really? That's what's going to do it? I kid.
You know, I wish that I could say I have been talking to students around the country on this subject of finding a way to come back to civil discourse and things that we can all agree to, and making the system work again. I think what it comes down to is we have got to be more tolerant of each other's views. And we also have to be more tolerant of the fact that we may have differing views, and we have to be able to discuss them. And also we have to exercise forbearance and not saying things that are on the tip of our tongue all the time.
You're going to have to give me some forbearance, because I will let you get to that just as soon as I come back. But hang on, friends. We'll do this again. If you're just joining us, we occasionally have to break away to handle both sides. Back to the broadcast side here, Kimberly Gill.
Hello.
Standing by.
Great conversation over there.
It's been really interesting so far as we, the results have been a little bit, actually, maybe a little ahead of where we expect we would be. But we need to get back here to the broadcast side now. And we welcome you back to our special coverage of Decision 2022.
The polls close at the top of the 8 o'clock hour, and now those votes are being counted. As the night progresses, we will bring you the latest updates on air and online.
Governor's race, of course, is the one at the top of the ticket, and the one we're watching closely between Governor Gretchen Whitmer and the Republican challenger Tudor Dixon. That's just 1% of the vote in right now, so we've got a long way to go here.
Yeah, long night to go. Another one that everybody's watching. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson running for re-election as the state's top election official. She's being challenged by former community college instructor Christina Caramo, and again, just 1% of the precincts reporting, but Benson ahead there slightly.
And a race that we've been talking about quite a bit over on Local 4 Plus tonight, the race for Attorney General, the one that the polls show us is the closest of the top of the ticket races, Dana Nessel in her race with the challenger, Matt DePerno, the Republican.
And then Michigan voters making a big decision on Prop 3 that would put a woman's right to abortion and use of contraceptives in the state constitution. We've been saying it all night, but we should point out that the high level of absentee voting is likely to delay the results because more than 1.7 million absentee ballots have already been turned in. So.
And we are also watching this very large turnout for in-person voting from today, but also then this surge of day of registrations going on university campuses. University of Michigan has students still waiting to do exactly that. Let's get back to Tim Pamplin with the night cam in Ann Arbor. Tim.
Devin, an absolutely wild scene, isn't it, out here at the University of Michigan? I'd say IFB problems there, but a wild scene as hundreds and hundreds of students have lined up here to register to vote and then immediately go vote inside the University of Michigan Museum here. This student here sitting in their chair just waiting. Some students say they've been waiting up to 6 hours to get inside to cast their ballot. The line shut down at 8 o'clock officially, but it seems to be growing. And that's because a lot of students came, got validation they were in line, and then were allowed to get back into line. So we're going to be here for the long haul. It's going to go into the wee hours of the night, I suspect. That's it for now. Back to you guys downtown.
Just like college students there.
And same scene apparently going on in East Lansing at Michigan State. Yep.
Yeah, okay, let's check in on two key races for the state attorney general and secretary of state here.
Rod Maloney in Novi at the Suburban Collection Showplace with the DePerno and Karamo campaigns. Mara McDonald's at Motor City Casino with the incumbents in those races. Mara, let's start with you.
Hi, Devin, and I'll tell you what, the Democratic strategists here at the Motor City Casino are watching what's going on in Ann Arbor very carefully. They are very concerned that they don't want to see any of those students get disenfranchised, and they feel overwhelmingly comfortable with the top of the ticket races when it comes to governor, when it comes to secretary of state. But what's really hanging in the balance, they feel, is the AG's race. And they believe that every vote for a Democrat counts right now. So that's really where they're putting their energies. We are live in Detroit at the Motor City Casino. My colleague, Rod Maloney, is in Novi with the DePerno and the Karamo camps. Hi, Rod.
Yeah, good evening, Mara. You know, we're here at the Suburban Showplace Collection, and they are in a situation where there is a lot of confidence here. Matt DePerno, who is the Attorney General candidate, just came into the room here just a few minutes ago, and he walked around the room shaking hands. We have some video of him. He's still in here right now. There's a lot of confidence here, so we'll have to see how it goes as this race goes down to the wire. Devin, back to you.
All right, Rod, and we are back here in 30 minutes with another update.
More coverage on Local 4 Plus and click on Detroit.com. All right, partner.
Yep.
Go for
I'll
it.
be as soon as they tell me.
Yep, go for
Now?
it.
Okay.
There you go,
I'll see you later.
See you later.
Okay. Let's head back over here where Portia Roberson has been waiting very patiently to tell me what is going to bring the United States of America back together as one.
Oh, right.
So I've been waiting for this answer now for some time.
You didn't like my idea?
No, I liked your thought too. In fact, this is one of the things that we talked about. You and I've talked about. We were at an event together last week. It's really hard to find the thing that brings us together without it being some horrible disaster, which is what I'd hate to have to rely on that.
And I hate to admit that the pandemic, which I equate as a horrible disaster in some ways,
Didn't bring us together
at all.
Somehow.
In fact, it somewhat more divided us.
Right.
You know, I'm shocked by seeing these college campuses because I thought what would bring us back together, what would force us back together, is the idea that young people would be done with the electoral process to the extent that they didn't see anything getting done and they were going to just sit it out. And that people would be forced, people running for office would be forced to sort of figure out a way to work together to bring people back to be interested in elections, because that's what I thought, right? I'm seeing tonight that that's not quite true, because it seems like a lot of young people are turning out, even though I know and I've heard their frustration about elected offices and then feeling like nobody gets anything done. Nobody can work together. I do think that continues to build, not only with young people. I think across the board, people are getting more and more frustrated with this concept, this idea that we're so polarized that we adhere to our side, our team, and nothing gets done. And people don't feel like their lives are getting better. And I think if anything, people are going to drive elected officials to figure this thing out because they're tired of putting people in office and feeling like nothing changes in their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, it's fair. And Caitlin, unfortunately, the way that these election cycles work, right about Friday of this week, it'll feel like the 2024 cycle starts. And that keeps us in this maelstrom a little bit too, doesn't it?
That's true. I think, fortunately, we're seeing that democracy is very vibrant. I think so. Maybe some of the fear that it's falling apart can be assuaged after this election. But back to your question about what would bring us together, I think more education about what our government is there to do, about the roles of government, about the separation of powers. There's no point in trying to get all Americans to agree, nor do I think that's necessarily healthy. So maybe some more input onto what, and of course that's going to be a little biased no matter where you get it, but more about the roles of government would help us kind of tame our own passions, right? And realize that, moderation is the key here. That's just my input.
Yeah, no, I like that. I want to quickly mention we are awaiting an update from Jocelyn Benson, Secretary of State, not on her own election prospects, I don't guess, but on the way that voting, the balloting went today and what is still going on as we see these lines continue into the night. Just as soon as that happens, we'll get you to her. Mario, I want to talk about a little, and I want to let everybody weigh in on this, though. If we're watching this big surge of students who we assume are largely motivated by Proposal 3, I have not wanted to assume that Proposal 3 only moves in one direction. I know that it's part of the Republican boilerplate that you're supposed to be anti-abortion. I'm not sure. We saw at our poll, as we split it out and you start looking at there's surprising support for Roe versus Wade among a lot of Republicans too. So I don't want to assume that necessarily spills over, right?
That's very fair. And I was just telling Mike, we were over doing the break, that it was a day when the Republican Party dominated college campuses. They had the young Republicans Party and students, and that unification was much more powerful than the Democrats.
Mike Bishop had to be be President of the Young Republicans at one time.
I will remind you.
Maybe once.
He was. I'll remind you that the last time we saw this surge of students and young people going to the polls, we elected a guy named Barack Obama. And we didn't anticipate and we didn't see this coming in the large numbers that it did. And they shifted and they voted strong in a block for him for change. And they helped elect the first black African-American president of the United States, which was overwhelmingly because of them. So we may see something historic after tonight, after the votes are counted.
Mike, get back to what I was saying though about Proposal 3. It's not necessarily. I'm not sure if Proposal 3 it turns out to be the biggest driver of a lot of people to the polls. We've gone back and forth about whether it was the economy and inflation or abortion that was going to be the main driver. If it is Proposal 3, would it be wrong to assume that that's only good for Democrats?
Sure, it'd be wrong. I think, there are a lot of young people that are very actively involved in the pro-life movement and are very active in this No on 3 campaign. But I also think you need to pay attention to the fact that these younger people feel invisible right now. And they don't feel like they're part of the process. They're watching these older people do things in a way that just is incomprehensible. It's just inconceivable that they could do what they do and how they're doing it. So they want to be involved and they don't want to be invisible anymore. And now they're seeing two octogenarians going to run again. And it's a replay of what they've seen in the past. They've got to figure out how to come together and be a part of the future of this country. And so I think Prop 3 is important for them, but I think there are a lot of other issues that are equally as important, getting them out.
Great thoughts on that. I want to get back to Christy and Richard. And Richard, let's weigh in a little bit on what your thinking was if all of a sudden you have to recalibrate the young vote.
He's already writing down a lot of numbers.
I understand.
I mean, you just totally turned it the other way.
Is this where I say math is hard?
Back to you. Go ahead, Richard. You're on the hot seat now.
Honestly, if we see a surge in youth vote, that's really good news for the Democrats. And it's really good news for Proposal 3. I think those are good numbers Democrats want to see. The other thing we're seeing out of Oakland County.
Yeah, we've been watching this, and he does have a scribble pad here. Tell us what you've been able to gather right now, Richard.
We've been looking at these numbers in Oakland County and comparing, communities that are all in so far. And what we're seeing is Gretchen Whitmer is outrunning her 2018 numbers in some of these communities right now.
So where did you look at? You saw Clawson's numbers?
Clawson, Orchard Lake, and even areas where she lost in 2018, she's still losing, but by less amounts. If that sustains itself in Oakland County, that's very good news for Governor Whitmer.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the money that has been surrounding these races, and specifically looking at proposals. I know that we've been talking a lot about Prop 3 tonight. It feels like every year we say the most money that's ever been spent on an X amount of race, and it's just that keeps ratcheting up. But you're looking at over $60 million that we know of for Prop 3, the governor's race as well. Millions of dollars. How do you put that in context with what we've seen in years past?
We haven't seen anything like this in Michigan.
Yeah.
$60 million for one ballot proposal. That's an enormous amount of money. And the other thing, and we talk about these two waves crashing into each other. Michigan voters just had over $60 million thrown at them talking about for and against abortion. Of course that's going to be on the top of their minds. Yes, inflation is important, but boy, all they're being reminded about is abortion right now. So it's going to be a big issue as it plays out tonight.
And when you think about it, though, when you have three proposals, so we've got Prop 1, 2, and 3, and one changes term limits, which has been a little controversial. We talk about we want to have the institutional knowledge back that we took away a while ago. And so it just changes a little bit. Also transparency. And Prop 2 enshrining voting rights, and then Prop 3 looking at abortion. We're changing our state constitution, which can never be taken lightly as well.
Right. The interesting thing I've said about Proposal 1, it was polling very well, it looks to be doing well tonight. The one thing all voters across the aisle can agree on is sticking it to elected officials. And in this case, they require personal financial disclosure reform, and that actually lowers the amount of time you can spend in Lansing from 14 to 12. Removes which chamber it needs to be in.
I was just going to say, but you can do it consecutively in one chamber and then have the longevity there. Sticking it to, maybe we can say accountability, Richard. That maybe people want a little bit of accountability there. It's going to be interesting to see. All right, stay put. We're going to be back in just a couple of minutes. We are waiting for Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson to talk about the voting process, not her campaign. We'll have that for you when we come back. Stay with us. And welcome back to our live election night coverage right here on Local 4 Plus and clickondetroit.com. We're so glad that you're with us. We'll be on until 11 o'clock tonight and giving you the very latest results that we're getting into the Channel 4 newsroom. Richard Juba joining me right now. We've been looking at some numbers all night long, and one race the races that I want to talk about right now is taking a look at the State House and Senate. Those seats are up now, and we are in a redistricting year. So after that entire very complicated process, they've redrawn the lines, and so now there could be some change that we haven't seen in a very, very long time. There's been Republican control. You know what? They're telling me right now that we are going to be going to Jocelyn Benson, so I'm giving you a good 20 minutes to think about that, Richard. Okay. Let's head on out and hear what Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson has to say.
Thank you all for being here tonight. Today, all across the state of Michigan, voters cast their ballots safely and securely at busy, orderly, and well-managed polling places. Just as we saw a record number of citizens choose to vote prior to today with an absentee ballot, we also saw a steady stream of voters casting their ballots in person throughout today as well. All across the state, the process went smoothly. Voters were in and out of their polling places quickly and comfortably. This is one of the marks of a successful election, and it is thanks to the diligent preparation of Republican, Democratic, and Independent clerks who partnered with law enforcement and planned extensively to ensure every eligible citizen could exercise their right to make their voice heard and hold their elected leaders accountable. Because of their work, there were no widespread or major disruptions reported to us today, and any minor issues were addressed quickly and without stopping voters from casting their ballot. We know of 2 instances where poll challengers may have acted inappropriately, one in Ann Arbor and one in Detroit. But as our preparation was ready, poll workers followed the de-escalation practices that we had prepared, and after conversations, both challengers departed polling places without any major incidents. You may have heard about another issue earlier in the day with electronic poll books used in the city of Detroit, where a technology glitch emerged. Now, in that case, in a few instances this morning, upon checking in a voter, some electronic poll books at polling places displayed an error message stating that the number on the ballot that they were about to provide to the voter in the precinct was identical to a number on an absentee ballot that had already been issued. Now, when this occurred, the poll worker then simply added an additional letter to the precinct ballot to distinguish them from the absentee ballots. Then, voters, because they had actually not received or cast an absentee ballot or voted in any way already, were issued the precinct ballot, and in all circumstances, eligible voters were able to vote. Minor issues like this will always arise in elections, but the role of clerks, the Bureau of Elections, and our partners in law enforcement is to identify and address them and solve them immediately to protect the rights of every Michigan voter. And that's precisely what we did today. And I know we'll continue to do so as absentee ballot counting continues. When we identify an issue, we work to solve it quickly and make sure it has minimal, if any, disruptions to the process. Now, in the hours ahead, we know some jurisdictions may finish counting their absentee ballots and report results, unofficial results, more quickly than others. We already are seeing some of that occur. Across the state, election workers are going to continue to prioritize accuracy and security above all else, and we will continue to provide updates as the next 24 hours unfold and as the tabulation process continues. I'll close by thanking the scores of clerks, election workers, law enforcement officials, federal partners, and volunteers who contributed to making this election a smooth and secure success. I'm proud that our elections continue to be among the most safe, secure, and accurate in the nation, and the work that we saw today underscores that truth. So on that note, I'll close and take your questions.
And you've been listening to Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson talking about the process today, in which I think is really good news for everyone to hear that things went smoothly and according to plan. It has been weeks and weeks for municipal clerks around the state of Michigan preparing for Election Day today, preparing for the challengers who would be at the poll places, preparing to process everything. We do have a race that we want to call for you right now in the 11th Congressional District. We have the results in tonight and are declaring Haley Stevens the winner in the 11th over Mark Ambrose. And the numbers that we have here, 63% of the vote to 37%. So we can call that race in the 11th. Richard, let's go ahead as we're starting to see those numbers come in. A couple of also congressional races that we're going to be watching across the state. The 7th with Alyssa Slotkin facing off against State Senator Tom Barron. Also the 3rd over on the other side of the state, Hillary Schulten and John Gibbs there. And of course in the 8th Congressional District up in Flint, they were talking Dan Kildee in his seat there and defending his seat. But I want to get back to our conversation about the State House and the State Senate and where we might see movement there and looking at redistricting. And now that I'm going to pull up some nerdy numbers here that I was doing some digging earlier, that looking at the new districts that could produce 57 Democratic seats to 53 Republican seats when we're looking at the House. And then also in the State Senate, it could go 20 Democratic seats maybe to 18. What kind of flip would that be? And I know it would take a yeoman effort, but still.
It would. It would be a monumental flip. I think the first place to look is at the state Senate. I think when the Redistricting Commission redesigned these districts, it essentially created a split chamber, pretty much. And it's down to 4 races, pretty much. We're looking at Senate Districts 11 and 12 in Macomb County. We're looking at Senate Districts 30 over in Grand Rapids and 35 up in the Tri-Cities.
What will they tell you?
They will tell us who's going to control the chamber, frankly. And, you know, I would expect that the Democrats will do well in SD 11 in Macomb County. And then all they need is one more of those districts, and it's a tied chamber. And in a tied chamber, the lieutenant governor would decide, you know, who's the leadership there. If it's Governor Whitmer, that would be Garland Gilchrist making that decision. So, you know, there's a real 50-50 shot here that we could see an absolutely historic shift in the Senate. We have not had a Democratic Senate since early in 1984. I think a lot of people weren't even born. And so I think it's a very big deal to watch tonight, and we probably may not even know tonight.
as they continue to count the absentee ballots. All right, stay put with us here, Richard, and you stay put with us as well. We're continuing to get results. Make sure you keep checking on clickondetroit.com. Our live coverage of Election Night 2022 continues in just a moment. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Ann Arbor, Michigan, the University of Michigan campus, where hundreds and hundreds of people have been lining up all day to register to vote. Now, I've got to make a clarification. Earlier, I said the line was growing after 8 o'clock. That was incorrect. People were allowed to leave the line and then rejoin the line. That's a clarification I wanted to make there. In fact, the last person to get in line was Eric here, Eric Peterson, a student here. What was it important for you to be here?
I felt like I had to do my civic duty. I saw everyone else on the line and had to do it as well, you know?
You were telling me you were in class up until the last minute, huh?
Yeah, I was teaching my class until 7:50. I ran over here, got in line just in time.
So thank you, Eric, for talking. That's Eric Peterson from Texas. Came out of class. He's a post-grad student. Joined the line. The line continues at this hour. Back to you guys downtown.
Look at this line. It is 20 after 9. So one of the operative phrases that I took out of Jocelyn Benson's remarks a while ago were, as she was talking about counting over these next 24 hours. Right. So don't expect maybe to, unless you're just really a night owl, don't expect to go to bed tonight knowing everything about every winner of all these races. Gang, let's talk a little bit about some of the proposals. We've talked a lot about Proposal 3. Proposal 1, MERS is calling this as passed, and it won't be a surprise to any of us, Mike, because all three proposals in most of the polling that we've done were passing by pretty handy marks. Is this a good idea to this term limit creation of 12 years total, no matter what you are in the legislature? As a former legislator, I think a lot of people have changed their views over the years of term limits. This is a different approach to trying to do it. What do you think?
I think the concept is good. You know, I have the benefit of objectivity being out now.
Mm-hmm.
So I left under term limits. I honor that. I don't think the term limits is the right solution to the problem, but this may be a better form of term limits, in my opinion. I think they should also have a part-time legislature in Michigan. They should have added that. But this proposal is not just about the good stuff that they kind of highlight. There are some other issues packed in there. And this is why I'm not sure that I could, it's hard for me to vote for a proposal. It's hard to vote for an amendment to the Constitution to begin with. To me, that's a document you should only change if you really think there's something necessary. But a lot of these proposals come out, and buried within it are little gifts for someone here and there, and things that might even reverse what you think it might be. So you have to be very careful about how you read these things and consider it carefully.
The other highlight of it is requiring more financial transparency.
All great
That's
things.
not a bad idea, right?
Not a bad idea at all. But you know, there are some other things in there too that you know, I have read so much on this issue because those particular behind. In fact, I think I may have even signed a
petition
for this thing. And then I went back and looked at it and I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I mean, I'm a lawyer in the group thinking, I didn't read the fine print.
I feel a lot better knowing this, by the way.
But now I have 10 or 15 people telling me a different, idea as to what it actually stands for. And who knows what's true? You know, it's very hard to know. And I just hope it turns out right.
Portia, term limits seem, the old saw here is that term limits are for the lawmakers. The lobbyists don't have term limits. Right. And if you limit the time that lawmakers can be there, staff and lobbyists end up staying in place, and that's where the power base becomes rather than among lawmakers. Is there anything to that?
Yeah, no, I think that there's a I think that, for me, well, one, I was surprised that Proposition 1 was the first one that passed, because that was the one that I think people were most concerned about. People thought it maybe didn't go far enough. There were some people that I talked to who didn't think it went far enough. And so I thought that would be one, even though polling showed that they're all going to pass, and hopefully that'll hold true. This was the one that I thought would be a little late. We would find out a little bit later. So it's interesting to see that it's passed. I'm always a big proponent of I've seen enough where we've had to have turnover in the legislature too quickly. People start to get an idea of what they're supposed to be doing there. And
right about
gone.
the time that you leave.
And have to leave. So, I thought, full transparency, I voted yes on it, and I thought it was a good proposal.
Transparency is part of this, Caitlin. And for reporters like us, Michigan is one of the least transparent states in the country, pretty opaque. At least this would open up, there'd be a little bit more disclosure on the financial side. That's got to be good, right?
Yeah, the Detroit News recommended a yes vote on Prop 1. We felt it was a fix to some of the term limit challenges and some of the inexperience that we've noticed in Lansing too. And so we thought this helped short it up. We're of course hesitant to do anything to the Constitution. We recommended voting no on the other two, but this we felt was a change that could happen within the right bounds. So.
I was hesitant. I'll tell you why, because most of the elected
you and
officials
Mike
that I
couldn't
talked
figure out
to
what it really
were
meant.
Trying to convince me to vote for it. I said, wait a minute now, this is a little weird. Something's wrong with this. But it doesn't prevent you from going from one chamber to the other. You can get termed out of one.
I got you.
And go hang out in another chamber for another 12 years.
Hold that thought. We're going to go do we're going to do the broadcast dance again here and move back over here as we join the broadcast side with the next update here at where are we? We're at 9:30.
Yeah, almost.
Did the clocks get changed?
Yeah,
they did.
It's going
they did.
fast.
Okay, back with Kimberly Gill, and Richard Zuba is going to be a part of this one as well. So stand by. And welcome back to our special coverage of Decision 2022. We are now getting close to the 9:30 hour. The results continue to trickle in, though Jocelyn Benson, a short while ago, kind of reminded us we're going to need to have some patience.
That's exactly right. As the night progresses on, we'll bring you the latest updates on air and online. Let's look at some more of the top races here.
Where we are right now, 4% of the vote in, so we've got a long way to go. But Gretchen Whitmer right now with an early 6-point lead over Tudor Dixon.
That's right. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. We heard her speak earlier, running for re-election as a state top election official. She's been challenged by former community college instructor Christina Caramo. Caramo is a 2020 presidential election denier and is endorsed by former President Trump. Just 4% of the precincts reporting there.
Been talking about the race for the Attorney General's spot. The incumbent Dana Nessel right now, this was the tightest one, the polls were telling us, and it's pretty tight right now, though again, this is very early, 51% to 47 over Matt DePerno.
Yeah, there's one race the Associated Press is calling tonight, and it is in the 11th Congressional District. I heard you mention this earlier, Haley Stevens, the projected winner over Mark Ambrose.
Although we should probably include among the losers of that race, Andy Levin, right, who had ended up running against her as the redistricting took one seat away. Now the proposals. We take a look at Proposal 1, which would change the state legislative term limit to 12 total years in the legislature. So that would be a mixture of Senate and House, if it need be, or one or the other. Would also require annual public financial disclosure reports by legislators and other state officers. This one is passing rather handily, and we would be shocked if it didn't.
Yeah. Now let's look at Proposal 2. It would amend the state's constitution and to add provisions regarding elections. Again, very, very early. 3% of the precincts reporting, 60% so far saying yes.
That would create early voting in Michigan of a 9-day voting period. Finally, Proposal 3, of course, the one that has gotten the most attention, would put a woman's right to abortion and use of contraceptives in the state constitution. We've got a long way to go here, but right now that one is leading as well. And let's bring in our pollster, Richard Zuba. I think so far we said going into this evening that the story was going to be turnout, and that's exactly what it's been already.
It is. We're looking at, for example, the numbers coming out of Oakland County, and it sure looks like they're going to exceed the 2018 turnout. and be somewhere between 18 and 20, which is a remarkable level of turnout that we're seeing.
And the number of college students is just unbelievable. The lines.
I don't want us to get too carried away. I mean, obviously, these lines look long. In the overall scheme of things, I don't know how much it's going to add up to, but it tells us a little bit about the temperature, the mood of the evening and the day.
You know, as U of I, as we've talked, those students aren't coming out, as you said, because of the state senate. They are coming out because of Proposal 3, and it is driving that youth vote, which, you know, will pay dividends for the Democrats.
Sure.
What are the other surprises to you so far, if any?
Well, you know, the one thing I just want to remind everybody of is we're going to see these absentee voters coming in later. You know, so these numbers are very early. I don't know that we can really gauge much from them yet. And I think we need to be careful to see what those absentees look like before we start making decisions about them.
For a couple of weeks now, you and I have been working toward expectation management and understanding not only how late the numbers could come in, but the way that they could shift the way things look as well. But Jocelyn Benson told us a little while ago about how it's going to look over these next 24 hours. So she's expecting a long go of it as well. We're back in 30 minutes with another update.
Yeah, stay with us on Local 4 Plus and click on Detroit.com for more coverage.
Okay. I'll see you in a little bit. Back over to my post. I need the old dancing. You need a runway. I need a runway. I need those. Who was the dance instructor who had you put the footprints down? Yeah, the little steps. Anyway, yes, I am dating myself. Thank you. That's why it's a good thing I can't think of his name at the moment. Okay, here we are continuing. We're great to have you with us here tonight on Local 4 Plus. Mike Bishop, I haven't reintroduced everybody in a while. Mike Bishop, Portia Roberson, Caitlin Buss, and Mario Morrow. Let's move to Proposal 2, if we could. This one would change.
Start with him.
Okay, let's go down here. Good idea. While you think about how you signed the. I bet you didn't sign the petition on this one.
An authority on these proposals. Admittedly so.
This one, among other things, Mario, would create 9 days of early voting. Different. That's different than absentee voting. But give me your thumbnail thoughts on changing. It would also change the way when votes can be counted, on and on and on.
Right.
So tell me about.
We wouldn't be battling about the AV and who's qualified to vote before and all this other stuff. You got to give people, make voting convenient for folks. I'm a strong believer in, opening it up early for, Saturdays and Sundays, whatever it takes to get people to vote and participate in the process. 9 days is good.
Is there a point at which it's too early? I mean, should I be able to vote in June for an election that takes place in November?
I think that there should be some guidelines, and, I think there's some reasonable compromise there. I think there's a good compromise with 9 days, and I think that people will begin to accept that fact. I mean, there are some countries that vote a month before you can actually go to the polls. So it works. It gives people some time, and maybe we can count the votes early.
Caitlin, Detroit News didn't love this one.
No. I think there are concerns about election law, and those change from year to year. I'm not sure why we're putting any of this in the Constitution. I don't, that was our concern with it.
Right.
Is that certainly things, look what happened with COVID and election law and the way everyone reacted to that. So imagine if we had something about that in the Constitution. So that was our concern with it. These things are real, there's a lot of flexibility there, but it can be achieved through the policy-making process. It doesn't have to be a constitutional piece.
It's funny, with the way absentee worked this year, there were a lot of votes cast before all the debates, but certainly before the second debate was seen. Although our polling, Richard can talk about this later too, the debates didn't seem to affect opinion, move the needle at all. Probably more indicative of the way that people are aligned on policy issues this year. But and obviously, you don't have to wait for any debate. You don't have to watch anything. You can vote whatever you want. I'm not trying to force that. But is there a point when it's too early? Is 9 days too early?
No, I don't think 9 days is too early. I would have gone with 2 weeks, 14 days. I mean, I think that, if we're not going to close schools, close work, make election day a holiday, it's a day off, then we need to do whatever we can to get people involved in the process. Obviously, even if we do a federal holiday, we're still going to have people who have to go to work and aren't going to be able to be a part of the process. And again, We say this is a democracy. We want it to work. You've got to have every voice and every person counted. And so the way to do that is to give ample time for people to get to the polls in where it works with their schedule and not with a schedule that we previously.
Mike, I've been waiting to hear your take on this.
I'm a skeptic of all these proposals, and that's because being a former member of the legislature, I do think it's the responsibility of the legislature, and I do think it takes away power away from not just the legislature, but from the people. When you embed things into the Constitution, you take away the right of the legislature to represent the people that they do, to bring issues forward, and they change frequently. There are a lot of issues in the Constitution that are embedded that prevent the legislature from addressing and making better. And for example, our public universities are separate and autonomous in the Constitution.
Yeah.
You know, there are a lot of things there that I mean, it's a different issue, but you gotta respect your process and your legislative process and the people that represent them.
The Constitution starts to get pretty long if you run everything through it. Quickly, I got to get back over to Christy.
Well, you know, and it's interesting because this is why people want to put things in the Constitution, because they don't think the legislature can come together to get things done. And this is sort of the issue there.
Yeah, but then we throw out the entire process.
If we could feel like we could agree and people would come together and actually move towards making sure more people can be involved in the democratic process, I think more of us would say we don't need to embed it in the Constitution.
Can I possibly agree with both of you? Because you both have made some really good points right there. Let's get back over to Christy and Richard.
Yeah, very true. All right, some of the hardest working people right now are the municipal clerks and the workers all across the state of Michigan who are now processing and counting all the votes that have been made. So Susan Nash, she is the clerk in Livonia, joins me now by Zoom. I know it has been a long process, Susan, so tell us how you're doing right now and what the day turned out to be for you.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay, we're doing very well. We precincts, I think last I saw in the lobby, we had over 20% in, not 20%, I'm sorry, 20 precincts, which would be over 50% returns. We have 44 precincts. So those numbers are being put in. We will get them down to the county as fast as we can, as soon as the reports are ready for them. Our absentees are probably at 80% done. We are just now waiting for the last ballots, the ballots that come in up until 8 o'clock. And so those still have to be scanned and received. They still have to have signature checks. They have to be verified. They have to be put in order. They have to be put out, in sequential order inside the precinct so they can go to the counting board, and then they're checked again over there. So that last batch is getting ready to be delivered probably within the next half hour. We ended up having a 96% return rate, 96.52% return rate, actually.
Oh.
We issued 25,818 absentee ballots, and we have received back 24,920.
Those are great numbers, Susan. Tell me, did you have a lot of people who came today to register to vote and then wanted to cast a ballot? And what was turnout in general for you?
Yes, and I can tell you I don't know exactly voter turnout. Sure. I don't have that number in front of me, but I can tell you exactly how many people registered to vote today. Mm-hmm. You're at City Hall because we had a steady flow. We had exactly 62 people registered to vote today at City Hall. And it was a mix if they stayed here and did absentee or if they went to the precinct. Most stay here, but you have ones that still want to go to the precinct, and if time's permitting, they will go. Mm-hmm. And we had a lot of people that had absentees and it chose to then spoil them and vote at the precinct. So they had not returned their absentee. So if they still were in possession and we did not have it received back here, as long as we didn't have it, the clerks are able to spoil out the absentee and they can vote in person. And so we did have quite a bit of that today, and I don't have a number for that.
Interesting. You and I had talked about 2 weeks ago about preparations and getting ready for challengers and poll watchers who could be just, again, monitoring the process. Talk to me about how that went today, and was there any complaints, any problems, or what did you encounter?
We had one poll watcher challenger per se in the absentee room. No issues. We all worked together. She was able to walk around and see what she needed to see. And she stayed out of the way. She didn't get in anyone's way. And so we had no problems there. And frankly, I haven't heard any reports of any issues at the precincts. Now, I've been at City Hall quite a bit today, but I was also at the counting board a lot. So I didn't hear if there were a lot of them, but I wasn't getting texts and feedback to say that was happening.
I know that you, though, when you're visible, a lot of people in Livonia want to come up to you and say, hey, Susan, this is what I'm thinking about, or this is what I heard. What were people telling you today as you were moving through all the various rooms?
Well, I had one text message telling me that someone was reporting something inside a precinct, that they were videoing it. I'm like, okay, let's find out what this is. And it was actually one of our other news channels that was in there. So yeah, there was someone with a camera and they're allowed to be in there, but they were in their respectful distance and where they were allowed to be.
All right. So
and so I did have some complaints about, in Livonia, we do not allow candidates to have their signs in city property or school property. So I did have some candidates that had that, and we had some complaints on that, and we just pull them.
But on the whole, how are you feeling now in terms of getting a final vote count and
I would like to tell you when it's going to be, but I don't know exactly. They tend to not want me to keep walking in the room because the pressure's kind of on when the clerk keeps walking in and out. They're kind of like, okay, you can kind of go back to your office now. But I would say we'll have, I think, our precincts within the hour, probably, is my guess. I'm not hearing of any problems at precincts right now. And the absentees, I had said midnight, and that's probably what we're looking at. It's probably about midnight. And then that's my timeline that I'm thinking.
Well, we know that your job is not done yet, and we appreciate that you taking out the time, Susan Nash, the clerk in Livonia, to update us on the process and how everything went today. We appreciate it. Get back to work. We'll check in with you tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Thank you for voting.
Okay. You too. Richard, what numbers are you looking at? I know that you keep kind of checking what's coming in.
Well, I keep checking all of these races, the governor's race, the top three races, and now I'm looking at the congressionals. But again, we have to be very cognizant of the fact that these are early numbers without absentees. And they could all shift dramatically when those absentees start coming in. And what we're doing is we're comparing what we're seeing now to what we saw in 2018.
So then you can kind of project a trend from there?
Exactly. How is Governor Whitmer doing compared to how she did, 4 years ago? We're seeing uptick in votes for Dixon coming out of some of these rural areas. We're seeing Whitmer doing well in Oakland County. So we're going to have to keep an eye on this, balance it out, and see where we are in about an hour.
All right. Okay. And stay with us as our live coverage of Election Night 2022. Our midterms continues here on Local 4 Plus and click on Detroit.com. We're going to be here until 11 o'clock tonight. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. Let's get to some numbers here on Local 4 Plus and our election coverage. Quick snapshot of the governor's race right here as we are now up to 11% of the estimated total vote now counted. That's 7 precincts reporting. Here's a look at where things stand. 52-47 with the vote counted, about a 26,000 vote difference for the governor. And just to give you an idea, this is the way it went for her 4 years ago, a 53-44 win. And you see the red and the blue there over on this map here, if we can come back out here, here are the counties right here. Everything in white right now are counties that have no votes counted officially yet. So you have the blue ones for Governor Whitmer, red for Tudor Dixon, and that's where we're at with that. Now let's zoom in. We've been talking about Oakland County all night. Let's get to that and show you what's happening there. Oakland County, that's where the majority of votes have come in at. And right now, 60-39. And you've heard Richard talking about this trend and how it's going for the governor. We might be able to draw some lines as to the way it's going to go. 4 years ago, Oakland County, she won it by 17 points. And right now, you can see it's 60-39. Over in Macomb, that's also an interesting county. Not a lot of votes here, but I just want to do something here. Just a few hundred votes counted, but this is also an interesting county because if you remember, Macomb in 2016 went to President Trump. In 2020, the president lost it, or he won it again, and you'd have to think that Tudor Dixon has got to follow that Trump line, at least in Macomb County, maybe gives her an idea of what's going to happen for the rest of the state. And as we zoom back out, you can see that we got the hard blue and red there, but if we shade it, you can see it's a lot closer when you look at the counties this way rather than all blue, all red. All right, that's the governor's race. We haven't gotten to the House races yet. All right, let's zoom through some of these. I don't believe we have. We do have votes counted. This is out in Kent County, the Grand Rapids race. It's not in our area, but we show you this one because John Gibbs is the Republican that was backed by a lot of Democratic money that came in. They thought he'd be easier to beat. Schulten right now, it's early, trailing in the early vote count there. Let's go to the 6th. That's Debbie Dingell versus Whitney Williams. A lot of votes here. We've got 25% of the estimated total vote counted. Debbie Dingell, 67-33. That's the 6th. Let's get to the 7th. Obviously, this is one a lot of people are watching. The second most money in the nation, I believe at last check, has gone into this race. We've also talked about new maps this year, and I just want to give you an idea. This is the new 7th district. Here's what it looked like last time around. See how the map changed? All of this area is now that area. And of course, there's your current vote total. 12 precincts reporting. That's 38 out of 328 precincts that are in, 12%. Tom Barrett with the lead right now there. Paul Young versus Dan Kildee. This is the 8th. Again, now you see that how it gets Flint, Saginaw area. This is what the 8th was last time. Paul Young actually was going against Slotkin, totally different area. But now that's all been redrawn like a lot of these have. We have 11% of the estimated total vote in, 8 precincts reporting in this one. Let's get to the 9th. That's Lisa McClain's district, new district. 20,000 vote lead for her. John James versus Carl Marlinga. 5% of the estimated total vote in here in the 10th. Ways to go there. The 11th, this one's already been called by the AP. Haley Stevens wins that one. Rashida Tlaib expected to get that one as well. This is the new 12th. And the 13th, no votes coming in yet on that one. And let me give you a quick shot of Prop 3. That's one of the other huge things on the ballot tonight that a lot of people are talking about, looking for. The yeses have it right now, 10% of the estimated total vote coming in. We have the votes just keep churning out, and we're monitoring that. We'll make sure we update you as quickly as they come in. But for now, I'll send it over to Devin as we take one more last snapshot to the governor's race. Actually, we're going to break. We'll be right back on Local 4 Plus.
Welcome back to our special and continuing coverage of Decision 2022. A couple of helpful things have come in on Twitter for me recently. First off, Arthur Murray, School of Dance. Somebody help me remember that. Sorry, I forgot, the footprints you were supposed to follow. The other one, we were talking about young voters and the way that they're getting involved this year. This is a tweet, it's a picture of me off of the television screen, and the tweet is, "Dude from Scream 4 going to tell me about the election." It's among the younger set. I'm much more better known for Scream 4 than for Local 4, apparently. But the young voice is being heard tonight in this election. Thank you very much. Yes, we used to make movies here in Michigan a long time ago. I want us to talk about some of these congressional races. Mike, this race out in District 3 that Jason was just talking about, it's a really interesting one. John Gibbs and Hillary Scholten. This was the seat that was held by Peter Meijer, who had the audacity among Republicans to vote for impeaching Donald Trump. So this is a really interesting race for two reasons. Number one, John Gibbs is the Trump-endorsed candidate, so it's a test of that. It's also a real interesting test of redistricting, because it would be this would be the first time in what do we say, Richard? How long has it been since Grand Rapids has been represented by a Democrat? 1974. Or something like that. So this would be an extraordinary. Now this is very early results that you're seeing here right now. But talk a little bit about this matchup.
Well, that district leans a little bit Democrat now, so it's an uphill battle for the Republican candidate. You're right in saying that it was held by Peter Meijer, who had a slightly more moderate position than the current candidate. So that makes a difference. But I think that, Gibbs has got an uphill battle there. And I don't know that he seems to be working hard, and I don't know that he's well funded. But he is a Trump-endorsed candidate. I don't know how you look at that, if that is the reason why. Yeah. But I think he is in a district that's going to be difficult for him to win without any help.
There's a weird narrative here, Mario, that Democrats were criticized for helping chase Peter Meijer off. Right. And that the criticism was that it's not in anybody's best interest to chase off a good representative, whatever party they might be in, and then they could end up with John Gibbs instead of Peter Meijer, which should he win this seat. It's a really interesting dynamic.
I actually. I like Myers. I just thought that he was good for that district, if you will, but he went up against Trump, and he voted for impeachment. And when he did that, the nail was in the coffin. The interesting part about the Gibbs piece is that he's African American, he's a Republican, and there's a sector of that district that could possibly cross over to vote for him just for the simple fact that he's black. But I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, Caitlin, history is going to be made out there one way or the other. Either it's going to be the first black representative for Grand Rapids, or it's going to be the first woman in Congress from the Grand Rapids area.
Yeah, I think it'll probably be the woman. And she's a great kind of representative of that community. That's how we felt about it. We gave her our endorsement.
Right.
John Gibbs is a frustrating candidate, from Republicans. He wouldn't talk to our paper. He is Trump endorsed, but he's also said some really concerning things in the past that, at least as a woman, have really kind of, put my flags in the air. He tried to blame us for everything, kind of thing. So he's not the ideal Republican candidate. In my opinion, the loss of Peter Meijer was huge. He really did a great job for that district and was a great leader in Congress.
For a Republican not to come talk to the Detroit News is kind of...
It was, we gave him many chances, and we're nice.
It's a career decision you're making if you're a Republican. And, what are your thoughts on that one?
Well, first of all, I have to point out that Mario just showed how much of a Detroiter he is because he added an S to Myers. And that is key for a Detroiter. His name is Peter Meijer. Myers. Hey, I do it all the time.
Okay. And my father worked at Ford.
Ford, right. So did my dad. At one point, he worked at Ford. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think black folks in Grand Rapids are going to cross over to vote for him, because I just don't think he's going to appeal to them for so many reasons. And the Trump endorsement, while I know he went and tried to earn that support, I don't think it's going to help him that much. I think Hillary Scholten, I want to make sure I pronounce her name right. She is a middle of the road candidate. She's not too far left. She's not too far right. I think she's going to be ideal for
the Democratic corollary to Peter Meyer.
Correct. Pretty
Singular,
much.
Peter
Yep,
Meyer.
Peter Meyer.
That's pretty darn funny.
Myers.
The howl that you heard on that joke was from Kimberly Gill on the other side of the studio, who loves the habit of adding S's to everything in Detroit, right?
That's my neighbor.
That was from Kimberly Gills. Is it time for me to move over there?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, I have to go do that thing again. So I follow the Arthur Murray footsteps back across, but I'll be back to the gang here in just a minute.
Yeah.
That was pretty,
Kroger's,
Myers,
Fords. This is what we do.
Yep.
It's okay, though.
Here we are at Local 4s.
Local 4s. That's great.
We're going to continue. We're going to switch back over here to the broadcast side in just a minute. We're going to continue, though, our coverage. If you've been with us all night long, we really appreciate it on Local 4 Plus. Hang on just a second. And welcome back to our continuing coverage of Decision 2022.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get you updated on where things stand on some of the most important races across the state here.
Numbers keep coming in, and again, keep in mind with 8% of the vote reporting right now, we expect that we are largely, almost exclusively seeing day of voting. The absentee ballots will be added in later, but with 8% of the early vote in right now, Gretchen Whitmer with a 9-point lead over the Republican Tudor Dixon.
Yeah, just trickling in here ever so slowly. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson running for re-election against Republican challenger Christina Caramo, and you see the results there again, just 8% of the precincts reporting.
10-point lead there. And to the race for Attorney General, the incumbent Democrat Dana Nessel getting quite a challenge from Matt DePerno. Right now, with about 7% of that vote in, she is up by 8 points.
Yeah. And then Michigan voters making a big decision on Prop 3 that would put a woman's right to abortion and use of contraceptives in the state constitution. Early results show that the yes vote is winning 56%.
Yeah, just 7% there as well.
And it's likely going to be a late night with 1.8 million absentee ballots that need to be processed.
Even though some counties or some clerks, all clerks were given the option of starting to process them a little early. Some of them chose not to do that, but really that only amounts to opening the envelope and getting them ready to be processed and counted. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson gave us an update on all of this within the last hour. Hank Winchester was there and joins us live from Detroit's News Center neighborhood. Hank, it was when she pointed out these next 24 hours, that was the operative phrase that has stayed in my mind.
Yeah, Devin, Kimberly, that is key. I mean, she was clearly pleased with how things have played out so far across the state and here in Metro Detroit, but also letting us all know it's going to be a while to get those official numbers. Let me get you through some of the numbers that we know right now. Close to 2 million absentee ballots handed in across the state. Lines continuing right now in East Lansing, Ann Arbor, and also in Grand Rapids near Grand Valley. The secretary is saying, of course, everything is going to be done to make sure those still waiting in line are able to vote. Now, there were two situations across the state, one here in the city of Detroit, also Ann Arbor, where they had to deal with some challengers and people that may have been working to influence voters. She says those situations were handled very quickly. Overall, saying that she's very pleased with how things have played out in the state today. There were some technical glitches in Detroit, but she said those were worked out very quickly and people were able to vote. Back to you.
Okay.
All right, Hank. We are hearing of a very large turnout for in-person voting that's been going on all day.
Tim Pamplin is live at the University of Michigan, where students are still waiting to vote. He is live with the night cam. Tim.
That's right. It's a problem that I don't think we're all too upset about, seeing these engaged youngsters lining up some up to 6 hours to register to vote. The city of Ann Arbor clerk's office has set up this satellite office on the campus, and many of these students are now in line waiting to cast their vote. They've got to register first. As I make my way outside here, you can see the line still stretches all the way down there. Several hundred people still in line. They say they're going to be here until tomorrow morning. That is the scene right now in Ann Arbor. Tim Pamplin, back to you guys downtown.
Got their blankets. At least they're prepared in that sense.
Exactly. It's kind of like waiting out for tickets or to get into a ball, ball game.
Sure.
It's how, they're built for it. We've got a lot more to come here. Obviously, tonight we are coming right back here in another 30 minutes or so with another update.
We'll be updating election results as they come in. Click on Detroit.com, and our election coverage continues right now on Local 4 Plus. All right.
I wanted to get the 100,000. Now, because we're back over here on Local 4 Plus, Jason Colthorpe just telling me that in Oakland County, in Oakland County, they have counted already about 100,000 absentee ballots, which were breaking which way?
I know.
You said they were. Well, I know, but
it's
76,000 of those 100,000 votes absentee going for Gretchen Whitmer. So we expected the absentee ballots to be very lopsided in favor of Democrats, and so far that's the case in Oakland County. 100,000 absentee ballots being counted in Oakland County. That's pretty good for 10 o'clock at night. Not bad, but we continue to watch this scene at U of M, and the line just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, and I just wonder, when do they stop it? Or is there an end point to this? Like, if people just continue, if it turns into sort of the thing to do, right, to come get in line, if you haven't voted.
We assumed they cut off the line at 8 o'clock. Orange cone is what somebody told me. I don't know if it was that may have just been
I'm hoping it just
a metaphorical
like
orange cone.
Maybe it's just a messy line, so it seems like it's grown a little bit. But if they've cut it off at 8, like I said, as long as people can register and maybe hopefully vote in the same line, but it's still going to be a long time.
But is the same thing happening at Michigan State and other colleges?
Well, Michigan State definitely. I haven't heard anything yet from Grand Valley or some of the other Eastern, Central, and some of the other schools. But it'd be interesting. We need to start making the rounds a little bit on that and check in. I wanted us to talk about another congressional race here, and this is what I guess they are talking about now as being the most expensive congressional race in the whole country, and that's that between Tom Barrett and. I keep wanting to say Alyssa Slotkin is the incumbent. She's an incumbent member of Congress, but it's basically a new seat. So this redistricting is what makes all of this kind of hard for us to sort of handicap. These districts have never been tried before.
Yeah, and she had to shift ground quite a bit in running again, and that's been a challenge, no doubt, for her. But this race has been one of the most interesting in Michigan, one of the most interesting in the country. As we're seeing right now, Barrett is still ahead. And I think he has a lot of potential to pull it off. The voters there, crime has been an issue in that Lansing area. There's been a lot of really on the ground issues that I think Barrett has spoken to, also as a state senator. So that's an interesting race. But Slotkin had a lot going for her. This redistricting really changed the dynamic.
Yeah, and in fact, Mario, she is on the list of, I think, among the 10 most likely to work across the aisle on Capitol Hill. It depends on your point of view whether that's good or bad in this day and age,
I would agree with that. Again, she had a challenger. I mean, someone who's capable of beating her and raising the funds to compete, and that's not always a good thing. You mentioned earlier it's one of the most watched races nationally.
Yep.
I think it'll go down to the wire. I don't think that just because she's Barrett is leading right now, that it's over. I think that these AV votes are going to make a big difference.
They'll tilt her way, we would
and
assume.
I think so, and I think it'll tighten up.
Would it be enough? Bipartisan, good word or bad word right now, Mike?
Well, it's a good word if you want to get something done. It's important to have bipartisanship. But when it comes to Alyssa Slotkin, she has voted 100% with Joe Biden. There's nothing wrong with that. And Nancy Pelosi, there's nothing wrong with that. You're an elected Democrat, but you can't portray yourself as bipartisan if you have that kind of record. Tom Barrett.
Well, she doesn't. I mean, she would say she's bipartisan, but that apolitical watch group that measures such things said that she's one of the 10 most bipartisan.
So oh yeah. I ran. That was the race that I ended.
Yes, of course. Yes.
And I watched in complete amazement at how able she was at convincing people that she was bipartisan. She now has a record. And she has to defend that, and that's what Tom has done such a great job. Tom Barrett is the challenger, or the Republican candidate. I think he's run a fantastic campaign, but it's so hard for him to be able to overcome that deluge of money. She is a prolific fundraiser. It's punishing I think they spent $35 million in the race that I ran in.
Well,
for a job that pays $184,000, and it's just immoral how much money was spent.
It is. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's such a pile of money. It's also, though, in that district, may be hard for him for Barrett to overcome his position on Proposal 3.
I think it's going to be very difficult for him to overcome that. And I also think that despite the fact, or in agreement with the fact that she has voted with President Biden 100% of the time, she also worked for President Bush. And that's been something she's continued to roll out and let people know. And I think people do respond to that she has carried, I guess, in some instances, the water or worked with people on both sides of the aisle. And I think right now that's really important to people because that is, as Mike said, how you get things done. And if we're looking to figure out how we're going to come together, this again is how we're going to come together, electing people who can get stuff done.
And who can raise money.
And who can raise money.
That's the thing. Let's get back. I know Christy and Richard have got a lot to weigh in on here and what we've been talking about. Guys?
Yeah, you know what, we're going to take a look at a couple of things. And Richard, I want you, though, to give us your first kind of snapshot feeling about hearing about those absentee numbers that are coming out of Oakland County right now.
Well, they're not surprising, frankly. We saw this in the polling where statewide, Governor Whitmer was taking about a 70 to 30 point margin over Tudor Dixon in the absentees. Based on what we're hearing out of these first 100,000 absentees coming out of Oakland, looks like an 80-20 margin. That's why we've been saying you've really got to wait to see what these absentees do. The other thing I'm noticing here is out of Oakland County, we're going to have 650,000 votes, it looks like, just out of Oakland County. That's far more than the 595,000 that we had in 2018.
In 18.
So
okay.
you start talking about margins, and if she's taking that kind of a margin out of Oakland County absentees, that really has ramifications across the state in terms of what kind of margins she can take.
It also shows the bigger story of the shift of demographics in Oakland County as well.
Absolutely.
That used to be the Republican stronghold, of the state.
That it used to be considered the breadbasket of the Republican Party in Michigan, and we saw this shift over the last decade. It's not anymore by any stretch. It's a Democratic county, and these numbers tonight are just the nail in the coffin.
Let's go ahead and take a pick up on some of the congressional conversations that Devin and the panel were having a little bit earlier, and take a look over at the 8th when we're looking at Dan Kildee and Paul Jung, and what you have feelings about where we might see things shift here in a really close race for Dan Kildee.
It is a close race, and this is a slightly Republican seat that was redrawn by the redistricting commission. Dan Kildee's a strong candidate because that Kildee name has been there forever, it seems like, up in the Tri-Cities area. And, this is a seat where if this goes Republican, it is a signal that it's a very bad night for Democrats nationally. So Kildee needs to hang on to this, and if he does, that's expected. If he doesn't, that's bad news for Democrats.
Yeah, and that's what we're really watching nationally. So when we focus on our congressional districts here and looking what the representation we're going to be sending to Washington, we're also looking at what the balance of power is going to be in D.C., in the House, and also taking a look at the Senate, U.S. Senate. But one thing I wanted to talk to you real quick about in the time that we have is the state House. We talked about the potential for the state Senate maybe to change, but what are you looking at the House?
Well, it's a harder lift for the Democrats to change, to shift the balance here. But there's three seats that are really catching my attention. One is the Rochester Hills seat with an incumbent Republican. And if Republicans lose that, that's not good news for them. But two seats that may really surprise people, one is up in Grand Traverse County. And if that's a
things have been shifting up there in the demographics up there, yeah.
It is one of these counties like Oakland and Kent that's shifting up in Grand Traverse. If they win the Lakeshore seat in Grand Traverse, that's a good win for the Democrats. And the other one that's going to surprise a lot of people is the Lakeshore seat out of southwestern Michigan. They drew a district from New Buffalo all the way up to Saugatuck, and it doesn't come in from the Lakeshore at all. So it doesn't take in any rural areas. It's all Lakeshore areas. If Democrats win that seat with Joey Andrews versus Kevin Whiteford, that's a real good sign for the Democrats.
All right, that's interesting. And again, I talk to people all the time. It's know who your state rep is and who your state senator is. Those are the people that are making decisions that are going to impact you directly in what's happening exactly where you live. All right, stay here with me, Richard. Of course, coming up after the break, Jason Colthorpe is going to join us. He has a fresh round of numbers. Those results are coming in right now, so stick around. We will be right back.
Hey, everybody, back on Local 4 Plus. We're breaking down some numbers, crunching them, a lot of them coming in. 18% of the estimated vote total coming in. This is not an official number. That's based on calculations pre-election, how many ballots are expected back in, absentee ballots, all of that. 10% of the precincts officially reporting that's 491 out of 4,690, but 18% in. This is a snapshot of the gubernatorial race right now, 51-47 to give you an idea of where things went 4 years ago for the governor. She won it 53-44 over Bill Schuette with about 4 million total votes that came in for that. And of course, important to pay attention to this number. 2 years later, there were 5.5 million votes cast in the presidential race. And if you notice, Tudor Dixon, she got the Donald Trump endorsement, holding that line right now, 47% with the votes that are counted right now. Donald Trump got 48% of the votes during the presidential election. And you can see it's not all black and white or blue and red, as we say. We put it on like this, and you can see that it's very close in a lot of different areas. Anything that's white, no votes have come in yet. And we've also been talking about the counties and what's going on the college campuses. What a phenomenon it is. And if you look in Washtenaw right now, where students are lined up at U of M still waiting to vote, doing that same-day registration and vote, you can see it's going governor's way. That's not a surprise. 4 years ago, she won by a huge margin, which is where Ann Arbor is. Scoot on up to Ingham County, where we're hearing there's long lines. She won it big 4 years ago. Right now, very few votes in, as we see there. And one more county to get to, Ottawa County. This is where Grand Valley State is. My daughter goes there. She did the same-day registration and vote, even though she's registered. She voted there today. It was an hour-and-a-half long wait for her as well as you do that. Now let's quickly get to some of the other races as we zoom along here. And we'll take a look at Oakland County, too, as well. But the Attorney General's race, we've got 18% of the estimated total vote in, 50-47. We're expecting this one to be very close all night. The local counties right now, you can see where those numbers are. Livingston going to Perno, Washtenaw and Oakland for Nestle right now. Macomb County still waiting on a bulk of the numbers, but very few in the metro area right now. And Wayne, of course, not getting any there as well. Secretary of State. Let's get this back out to the state numbers here. Overall, 53-45. Jocelyn Benson over Christina Karamo. These are the votes that are counted so far. 18% also in on that one. And let's go down the proposals. Start with Prop 3. 15% of the estimated total vote. Officially, 10% of the precincts are in on Prop 3. Yes is 57%. No is 43%. Again, that's the reproductive freedom. Prop 2, 60% to 40%. That's the promote the vote. 117,000 votes, the difference in that. And Prop 1 is the public official financial disclosure, the term limits proposal. That also big so far, only 13% of the votes in there. But when we come back in a little bit, we're also going to zoom down the House races. We have a whole bunch of those. The numbers are coming in on those as well, and we're going to break those down for you. For now, let's send it over to Devin and the panel.
All right, Jason. Let's talk a little bit about Detroit. Portia's really interesting situation here. We know that Detroit is not going to have an African-American member of Congress from at least the city limits, right? At this point, I mean, unless the Republican wins in the Sri Tenadar race, which would be a shocker if that were to happen here. But we also talked a lot, you and I, about whether or not people were even talking about the issues and going. Reaching out enough to Detroit voters in this. When you look at where we've been before, for all of a sudden, the only African-American members of Congress are going to be Republicans, likely, out of this. This is a really interesting time in Detroit politics.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I think, certainly in the 13th congressional race, there was a lot of talk about black representation mattered and how having a black representative from this district mattered so much. But I have to be honest, I'm wondering if some of the dynamics have shifted a bit and whether that's the most important thing to people and whether it's not that people have a narrative or a story that seemingly maybe more relatable to Detroiters or more relatable to people in the downriver communities, right? Because it seemed like that in terms of the votes. Now there was a lot of talk, and rightfully so, about how many people were in the race, including myself. But there also has to be some awareness of the fact that whatever is resonating with voters may not be just about race. And to be honest, we've had a white mayor for 12 years or 10 years now. So it can't be that Detroit is only focused on race, because it doesn't seem like we're voting in that way.
And in Shri Thanedar and Rashida Tlaib, you have two people who are pretty well acquainted with being a minority in America and the immigrant experience. But really interesting, Mario. What are your thoughts about, we talked about this after the primary on Flashpoint.
And you know, I echo everything that Portia just said. And the dynamics of, I think the voters becoming more aware of the candidates and how they relate to them. Sure, he did a good job. He connected with the voters. He made himself a part of them. He talked about how he grew up poor and deprived and, you know, lived in a car and I'm just one of you kind of thing. And it worked. And it did have an effect with a number of other candidates in the race. But Detroiters seem to be now voting on not purely race, but people who are connecting with them. You will see that more and more. And I believe that, you know, you'll see a number of votes that even come out for Mr. Bevins, who's running, I believe that's his name. Put an S on it.
Bivens. Martell Bivens, yeah.
We go again. So, I know, this beat me up, right? So, and I think you'll see a number of individuals who have crossed over, who didn't just vote straight Democratic and cast a vote. The jury is still out on Shri Thanedar.
Sure, of course. He hasn't even started yet. But Kaylin, this broadens out, though, to something that Richard and I were talking about in the newsroom earlier. When you look at the titans that used to run the Michigan political picture in Washington, it was names like Dingell and Upton and Levin and Conyers. That has all been, that sort of sense of authority that you get from that, that's all been wiped away. We got a lot of new members coming, no doubt, but Michigan influence is waning.
Yeah, you know, Debbie Dingell is one of the kind of the matriarch of the delegation if she wins tonight. And that has been a big change. I think, you know, that reflects just how much the issues have changed for Detroiters. But also, you know, a lot of those people were Democrats, and the Democrat Party has changed quite a bit as well. And so it's become younger and more progressive. And I guess it's to be seen if Detroit, you know, is keeping pace with that. I don't think that it necessarily is. They have some more pocketbook and real life issues, I think, in front of many Detroiters.
We've got a break coming up, but I want to let you weigh in on that. The waning sort of influence of Michigan politics in that sense.
I don't think it's just Michigan politics. I think it has to do with a national trend. We used to vote for the person because we knew them. And now with all this craziness, the white noise out there, everything's been diluted. It's hard to get to know people. So people are now voting for party instead of looking at the person. And that's the governing motivation behind most people is party over person. And that's a pretty scary trend, in my opinion, going the wrong direction there.
Interesting. Got to take a quick break. We'll continue with more of our special coverage of Decision 2022 on election night on Local 4.
Welcome back to our live coverage of election night here on Local 4 Plus. You're seeing Senator Debbie Stabenow, who is speaking at the Whitmer campaign party downtown in Detroit at the Motor City Casino at the Soundboard. And she's talking to supporters who were there at the Motor City Casino. Again, on nights like this, you have a lot of supporters, a lot of your campaign volunteers all gathering in one area, and that is in Detroit at the Motor City Casino. And we're going to take you now. This is Tudor Dixon's podium over on the west side of the state in Grand Rapids. No one is speaking right now, but again, we saw earlier that supporters were crowding in there as well. I think the doors open around 6 o'clock. And now we're taking you to the podium in Novi, where Christina Caramo and Matt DePerno, the challenger for Secretary of State and the challenger for Attorney General, that is their election party right there. And so everyone is gathering and waiting because, again, the numbers are coming in, but they're coming in slowly. And the number of people who voted absentee and the number of, I think, the intensity of this election that we have seen. No one is ready to start jumping around or celebrating anything yet. Everyone is, it's the watch and wait kind of period of the night we find ourselves hovering in right now, Richard.
We sure do. We're waiting.
Yeah,
We're waiting.
so when you see some of these early numbers and we talk about, you know, when you think of the numbers that came in from the voters of today, not the absentee, we thought that maybe we would see a little bit more Republicans because that's what you look at the polling, that's maybe what you would see more of. What are the numbers telling you?
Well, what's catching my attention right now as we look at these early numbers is I expected Dixon to actually have somewhat of a lead right now in these early numbers because these were election day voters. And we're not seeing that. We're seeing Whitmer holding a lead. Part of this is because of Oakland County they count their votes so quickly compared to everybody else. But the other thing I'm noticing here is Nessel is polling right at the levels of Benson and Whitmer.
Okay.
I think a lot of Republicans were hoping Nessel would be polling worse, would be pulling a lower percentage, and she's really kind of right in the same range as Whitmer and Benson.
You know, and it's maybe going a little bit to the point that Mike Bishop made earlier is that people are voting party at this point, and maybe not looking at particulars down the line. When will we be able to, I mean, obviously there's going to be days before we're able to shake out how this is all happening, but just kind of looking at what the trends you're seeing right now.
Yeah, well, you know, one of the things we saw in the polling, and I think it's showing up here in the numbers, is about, you know, in the governor's race, if you were voting yes on Proposal 3, about 88% of those voters were going for Gretchen Whitmer. If you were voting no, about 82% were going for Tudor Dixon. And we're seeing this trend in these numbers right now that, you know, there seems to be, you know, some correlation between this, and I think what we're going to end up seeing is a correlation between Proposal 3 and the rest of the ticket, too.
It's interesting because you think about what motivates people to come out and vote, and we've heard a couple of different things. Obviously, the economy, inflation, obviously abortion on the ballot, but also we've talked about this democracy is on the ballot, and we've heard that as a strong marching point, I think, from a lot of the Democratic candidates, but I think Republicans would say almost the same thing.
Right. We did see this in polling, that voters were saying that democracy was under threat, but they were saying, each party was saying it for very different reasons. And, you know, as Devin said on Proposal 3, it doesn't just move one way, it moves two ways. And the same goes with this democracy is under threat issue. Both Republicans and Democrats and independents agree that democracy is you know, weakened right now.
And, you know, we will end up waking up tomorrow morning. We will still be here. We'll have to just sort through how it all goes. And we'll be talking about it for a while. Devin, I'm going to toss it back over to you.
I've got to make my way back over to the news desk over there again. But I'm thinking about that poll that NBC had a couple of weeks ago. 80% of Republicans believe that Democrats are a threat to democracy. Not to be outdone, 80% of Republicans believe the Democrats are, or however I got it backwards. But both parties believe the same about the other party, and that's where we are tonight. Okay, we got another update to come here. Stay with us here on Local 4 Plus as we take care of the broadcast side here on Local 4. Welcome back as we continue our special coverage of Decision 2022.
Let's get you updated on where things stand on some of the most important races that are happening across the state right now.
Let's start with where the governor's race stands at this hour. Right now, still early in the count, but 6% lead right now for Gretchen Whitmer. We were just talking on Local 4 Plus. You would expect Tudor Dixon needs to be very close or leading before we get to the absentee ballots being counted, which we expect to be very robust for the Democratic Party.
Yeah, 1.8 million of those needing to be processed. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson running for re-election against Republican challenger Christina Caramo. 12% of the precincts reporting, and with 53% for Jocelyn Benson so far.
The race for Attorney General, Dana Nessel, and that race against Republican Matt DePerno, 12% of the vote in. This was the closest in the polls, and it's the closest that we have right now of the statewide races. Dana Nessel nursing a 3-point lead.
Watching that one closely, and then Michigan voters also making a big decision on Proposal 3. That would put a woman's right to abortion and use of contraceptives in the state constitution. 11% of the precincts reporting. Yes vote has 57% of the votes.
Our last poll had it at 55%, and so pretty close to where it stands right now. Let's head over to Jason Colthorpe. He's watching the numbers and breaking them down from across the state. Jason.
Yeah, let's stroll into some of these a little bit further, guys. Here's the statewide look at the governor's race. Not all black and white, very thin margin here, but 51-47. Here's your baseline. 4 years ago, the governor won 53-44 over Bill Schuette. This is where it stands now. That was 4 years ago. How about 2 years ago? This is how the presidential election went in Michigan. Trump endorsing Tudor Dixon. She's kind of holding that line. You would expect she's got to, obviously she has to do better if she's going to win the state. On that, as you zoom into some of the metro, let's check this out. Oakland County is the big county that's getting a lot of the reporting done here. Over 100,000 absentee ballots have been counted. Right now, it's going this way. 4 years ago, it also went the governor's way. Same in Washtenaw County, but Tudor Dixon in Livingston County getting those votes. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in Macomb County. Right now, not a lot of votes there. But let's zip into the U.S. House races and cover a few of these. This one is a national, it's not local, but it's the one a lot of, they're watching nationally. Scholten now getting, as these votes come in, has taken the lead on Gibbs out there in Kent County. The 6th district with Debbie Dingell is out in front of Whitney Williams in the 7th. And now remember, these are all new districts. I want to show you the map. Tom Barrett, this is all this money dumped into this rate. Tom Barrett out 56-42. This is what this district looks like now. This is what it used to be. So quite a change there in a lot of these districts, most of them anyway. District 8, Dan Kildee and Paul Young. This one looks like it's going to go right down to the wire as expected. Still in a lot of these races, about 18% of the estimated vote total is in. You're looking at District 9, Lisa McClain. Let's get to the James Marlingo race real quick. Haley Stevens, that one's already been called. Rashida Tlaib comfortably there, and still no votes counted there. Guys, back over to you.
Okay, so we've got a long way to go here tonight. We've been expecting that all along because of this massive haul of absentee ballots. So as the counting continues, our work here continues as well. That does it for this latest update, but we've got Local 4 News at 11 coming your way here about 30 minutes from now.
And our election coverage continues right now on Local 4 Plus.
I haven't tripped yet, and I've only got a few more trips to make. So let's see if we can get through this without. Okay, Kim, I'll see you in about 30 minutes for Local 4 News at 11. In the meantime, we'll continue here over on Local 4 Plus. And my gang is holding in really well. Nobody's fainted yet. Nobody's gotten up and left, got angry, thrown anything. So we continue to watch these numbers coming in. Kayla, it's interesting as we watch the breakdown of so far this governor's race, about a quarter of the vote coming in or so. You would expect Tudor Dixon needs to have, at least as I just said, kind of either close or a little bit of a lead if she's going to be able to withstand what the absentee ballots are going to be.
Yeah, I mean, this number for Tudor is good, but it's not great. So I think there's, anything could happen here, but she definitely needs to be where she's at right at this point in time to have a chance of pulling it out tomorrow.
Well, it's just not the absentee. Wayne County hasn't even,
And
come into
hasn't
play
even started
yet.
to play yet.
So
Right,
that could
right,
be a
right.
huge concern for Tudor Dixon.
We got a notice earlier from, I came in today and there was a letter, a printout, Kathy Garrett, the Wayne County clerk, kind of putting out a preemptive call to everybody going, look, this is the biggest county in the state. It's got more municipalities in it. It was basically, just cool your jet. Yeah, exactly. Don't beat me up too much. We'll get the results as we can. But so far, you've got to be pretty happy given the way Whitmer's showing, given what we know about absentee ballots.
Yeah, exactly. I think, this is what we hope for, and it seems to be shaping up in exactly what, many of us expected. Hopefully that trend will continue for the rest of the evening, and not just with the governor, but down the ticket. I think the race seems to be shaping up in a way that is pleasantly surprising at this point in terms of her having a bit of a lead on Matt DePerno, and let's hope that holds.
Saying she was the one that was in the most trouble with the polls. Let's talk a little bit about the State House situation in Lansing, Mike. I mentioned earlier, it's been since 1984 since Democrats have had control of the Senate. It's hard to tell exactly what the down ticket. We can only sort that out later to see what the top of the ticket did to things that happened down the ticket. But as somebody who has spent a fair amount of time in Lansing, explain to me what kind of change that might portend.
Well, I think you just have to look back on some of the previous elections, using 2018 as an example. When the current is that strong on the top, it's going to make a big difference for all the down ticket races, and that's particularly true for the state races, the state Senate and state House. The Senate race right now, it's about 17-17 that are solid. So they're working on basically 4 seats that are going to make up the difference in this in the makeup.
I think Richard has it down to 2. Yeah, 2 seats that he's watching closely.
Right now. So it's Macomb County, it's Kent County, it's a downriver area, the Midland tri-state area.
Tri-City, right?
Yeah, Tri-City area. Those are the ones that are going to decide all of the Senate and the decision or the majority in the Senate. It's going to come down to the wire, and it's going to be close. And who knows? It could have a 19-19 split. But if I had to guess, I would say that Republicans will hang on to the majority, maybe 21 seats.
Caitlin, what's it look like in Lansing if Gretchen Whitmer has a Democratic Senate rather than the Republican one that she's been dealing with?
I'm a little worried to think about that, but I think she'll feel even more emboldened. I think she'll feel more emboldened to do more unilateral governing, which is what she has been doing for a long time. So I think it's a very bad thing for Michiganians to have that alignment. We've had reckless spending. We have the highest budget we've ever had. We have.
Well, she didn't pass that budget by herself.
No, she didn't. But losing the Senate would make it even harder to keep that under control. There's a lot of debt. Federal funding is drying up. There's a lot of things happening. Whoever is in charge, if it's Whitmer, if it's Tudor, whatever chambers she has to work with, they have a lot of financial challenges coming toward them, and I think there's a lot to be negotiated if.
I don't have any hair, but you're making the hair on my head stand up with your comments. I'm thinking,
is that going to be easy?
Well, I'm thinking that if there's a Democratic, if the Democrats are in charge, I think the Governor Whitmer, if she's reelected, will have an opportunity to push her agenda forward, and something that she hasn't had the opportunity to do in the last term. There have been some wins, but for the most part...
It may have worked out in some ways. Imagine if she had gotten her 45-cent gas tax.
Well, we've been
a little trouble, right, for her.
Thank God. But you're right. So I think that she has an agenda, she had a plan, and if that happens, then if she's reelected, and the Dems are in charge, then she can be successful at moving our agenda forward.
All right, my agenda is to move things over to the right of us here. Let's get back over to Christy and Richard with their thoughts on where things are now. Christy?
It's a really interesting conversation because we haven't had a Democrat trifecta halfway where we've had Democrats at the top of the ticket and then control of the House and the Senate in Michigan If anyone wants to chime in here with that history one, I don't think.
Let's see, 1983.
Right, exactly.
1983. Blanchard, Kelly, Austin, Senate, and House.
And House.
Richard wins for the
Nicely
evening.
done. Nicely done,
and some
Professor.
great Michigan State history. So, it's 10:35, 10:36 at night. And Richard, I want you to step back for us and give us a bird's eye view of when going into this night and taking us up to where we are right now. What are we seeing with just some of the results coming in right now? And what is the gut feelings that you're having? And again, with the numbers and the polling that you have done and matching up to that.
Well, as I look at these numbers across the state, there are two things that are standing out. One is in Oakland County, this huge increase in voter turnout. And when we see those margins that Whitmer is getting, that's a much larger margin she's going to walk out of Oakland with than she did in 2018. The one that we haven't talked about yet that's really surprising me here is Kent County, the Grand Rapids area. A portion of the vote in, and Whitmer's got a 14,000 vote lead in Kent County.
And that is day of voting.
That's day voting that we're pretty confident because those absentees will come in later. Dixon needed to do a lot better in Kent County than to see the numbers I'm seeing right now. And I have to wonder, we're seeing these numbers play out. We see in the third congressional, Hillary Scholten has now taken that lead. I'm curious what's going on in that SD 30 race, the Senate District 30, between LeGrand and Huizenga. Is it working down the ticket, or is there ticket splitting taking place in Kent County? These are not the numbers, frankly, this early in the evening that I expected. I expected them to actually be much more Republican than what we're seing.
What about in terms of the percentage of vote totals that are in right now? We know that processing is different from municipality to municipality. I mean, this shows the speed that Oakland County has in being able to process votes, and they process for a couple of cities within Oakland County as well. And it also shows the change in the demographics in Oakland County that we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years as well.
Yeah, I mean, I joke that this is not John Engler's Kent County. It's not Dan Murphy's Oakland County anymore either. Or Brooks Patterson's for that matter. These were the breadbaskets of the Republican Party just 10 years ago, and it's not the case anymore. So I think, we're sitting here and we are still waiting, as Mario said, for Wayne County to come in. And that's a huge Democratic county. And so these are going to be margins that start to expand when those big urban counties fully come in here.
Let's watch a little bit in Macomb County. What should that tell us when you're looking at the numbers coming out of Macomb?
Well, I think Macomb's going to be very competitive. The question I have is, does Whitmer win Macomb or not? She did in 2018. If she wins Macomb County, boy, that's a real blow to the Republicans. I mean, they have to win Macomb County to be competitive statewide.
Other big stories coming out is the amount of absentee that we're looking at. It was over 2 million people who applied for absentee and turning in about 1.8 million as well.
Yeah.
And then we also saw looking at the younger voters. So, and I think we're pretty much enamored by the video that we see out of Ann Arbor. And I know on Twitter I'm looking at Brody Hall, and they always said nothing good happened at Brody after 10 p.m. Well, they're still lining up at Brody for us. We went to Michigan State, so we can make that joke. But to see that turnout of people, still kids, young people waiting in line to apply.
Well, it feels like when we see these images out of Ann Arbor and East Lansing of all these students waiting in line, this has moved beyond just voting to they want to be part of this moment. They are, this is a kind of this cause celeb for them, that they want to be in on this. That's really unique for an election to see this kind of wave of young voters. I'll be curious to see what the final numbers are going to be, or is this just images we're seeing that don't really tally up to big numbers?
And that's the interesting point again, because video is just that little snapshot in time, and Devin has said it a couple of times. Will that really make a difference? All right, Richard, of course, hang in here with me, and you as well here at home watching our election night coverage here on Local 4 Plus and clickondetroit.com. We have much more coming up, new numbers. Stay with us. We will be right back.
Back on Local 4 Plus, breaking down the numbers. Good to have you with us tonight, by the way, as we look at how many votes are coming in. We're now at about a quarter of the expected vote in on many of these races. You've been hearing Christy and Richard and the panel talk about county by county and where these numbers are coming in at, and I just want to drill down on that. We're also noticing something quite interesting amongst the rest of the races that I just noticed. Let me show you that it's not cut and dry in all these races, but as we come in right now, a quarter of the 27%, so we just got a few more votes in, but the governor's race 53 to 45, and again, just a quick reminder, 4 years ago, almost exactly the way it broke then and the way it's going now. All right, let's zoom into some of these counties here and just see what's going on. So we have a lot of this coming in. Oakland County now, these are some of the, obviously the metro, the bigger counties where a lot of these votes are going to be coming in. Let me zoom back out and show you anything in white, by the way. These are counties that have not reported yet. Mostly, yeah, they're not close or tied. Those are zeros. So we want to show you that those are going to come in, but there's just not a ton of votes that are going to make up the difference if the governor gets out to a huge lead here. Now, Oakland County, more than half of the votes have been counted there, and that's the difference. Not a surprise, though. She won this handily 4 years ago. Same in Washtenaw County, a huge 47% in there of the expected vote. And it broke about the same way a few years ago. Macomb, well, let me hit Wayne County first, because very few votes coming in, but we just got a huge batch that they've counted and they've reported, breaking huge the governor's way, and that's expected. A lot more votes in Wayne County expected to come in, expected to go the governor's way. And you look at Macomb, still waiting on a lot of that. This is interesting because 4 years ago, it was a close county, but the governor won it. And of course, 2 years prior, it went to Trump. You would think that Tudor-Dixon has to at least get the Trump line on that. Now, quickly, before we send it over to Devin, I want you to show you what we've just noticed here. Let's get the state totals. Check the governor's numbers. Starting to look a lot like the current attorney general's numbers with a quarter in. That's 52 to 46, the Secretary of State, 54-44, 24% of the estimated vote total in. So those three races starting to mirror each other a little bit in the percentage department. Devin, over to you.
That's scary.
All right. Thanks very much, Jason. We've got a couple of minutes here to kind of wrap things up before we get to our 11 o'clock newscast. One of the things we haven't talked about is this state Supreme Court race. Interesting. We don't often poll on state Supreme Court matters. This time we did, most recently, and we had, this is a week ago or so, a little over a week ago, and we had Brian Zara actually in third place in the polling, which is really hard to do because when you get into the vote and you look at the poll on the ballot and it says Brian Zara, Justice of the State Supreme Court, and that's a pretty daunting advantage to have. But this is a really interesting time on the state Supreme Court right now. Let my attorneys weigh in here. Mike, what are your thoughts about this? And by the way, we of course know Bridget McCormick is stepping down at the end of this year as the Chief Justice.
It's a helpless feeling for candidates for the Supreme Court because they don't have the ability to reach out to the electorate and really educate them on who they are and what they stand for. So
it's bad enough that they have to declare a party designation, isn't it?
That's a different story and a different day, but that should never happen. But the reality is, if you're a candidate for a statewide office, especially down the ballot like that, especially in a specific area of the law, where, you know, I get calls all the time from people, where are you going with this or that?
Yeah.
But most people don't understand the importance of the Supreme Court and really don't take the time to educate themselves on it. And it's getting worse and worse. I feel actually sorry for the folks that have to run down the ballot like that and for such important positions because they're just not heard.
I kind of feel sorry for voters in this one too, Portia, because it's a really tough thing to educate yourself on. Unless you want to go digging down to all the decisions and how the votes broke. I mean, this one, there was a big decision, of course, on putting Proposal 3 on the ballot, which people could point to. But it's dense work to try and figure out candidates.
I'm sure Mike is who wants to know what
what do I do?
candidate should you vote for. I spent, most of yesterday and better part of this morning responding to text messages from friends like, what judges do I vote for in Wayne County and at the state Supreme Court level. I do think this was an interesting race, particularly because it's the opportunity to put the first black woman on the Michigan State Supreme Court, and we've just recently done that.
Kyra Bolden.
Kyra Bolden. And of course, President Biden just did that. And so there may be some momentum there that we weren't expecting maybe when this started. Also, again, Roe v. Wade, I think that's going to push people to consider, Justice Zara's position on that. And then some things that were revealed in the last week or so may have changed some minds about how they were going to vote.
And Caitlin, the way that Proposal 3 is worded, we would expect there's going to be if it passes, there's going to be some tailoring of a Michigan abortion law that might have to survive Supreme Court oversight.
Yeah, I think we've seen on the national level and at the state level how important these judicial positions are and just how much they can control everything or change everything, how important these jobs are. I'm excited for Kyra Bolden. I think it's an exciting time for her. And like you were saying with Zara, there's just some really interesting dynamics in this particular race. But broadly, I think people should be more educated about these candidates because the Supreme Court in our state has made some very important decisions regarding abortion, regarding voting, regarding all these things that we're voting on, and they're the ones who are going to ultimately get to decide.
You get those calls too? How do I vote on the Supreme Court races?
I've actually run 3 Supreme Court races, so it's been interesting. To your
As
point,
a consultant, not a candidate.
Right. And I think that I do believe the incumbents will be reelected, and the governor, if Governor Gretchen Whitmer is reelected, Kyra Bolden will be her choice to fill that seat. So it's not a lose-lose for her. It'll probably be a win-win. And Zara it was just an interesting dynamic on how he just started dropping down with popularity.
We've just scratched the surface on so much that is yet to be decided here tonight. You guys have been terrific. I so appreciate the great conversation that we've had tonight, and that certainly includes Christy and Richard as well. This has been, of course, Christy, you and I are hogs in slop on a night like tonight.
Absolutely.
What would we rather do than talk politics?
Yeah, but they make us all look a little bit better and inform everybody at home. So thank you so much.
Yeah, fair point. Richard, thanks so much, but you're staying with it. We're not letting the number guy go anywhere because there's still a lot of folks in line over in Ann Arbor and many other places.
Yep, and keep watching. Click on Detroit.com. We'll have all the latest numbers for everyone. Keep you updated.
You got it. We'll see you here on the broadcast side for Local 4 News at 11. Thanks so much. 58.
Great job. How you doing? I'm so just laughing at you picking at Mario about the Myers. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I know. I didn't get to speak to him. That's a true Detroiter right there.
We've got one number over here and a delayed number on the graphics.
Thanks for being here. You did a great job. Yeah, I enjoyed listening to you. Y'all, I don't know about that, but we'll be here for a while. Did Mario leave?
Batteries. I'm gonna do your.
My neighbor Mario.
Oh, that's your name?
Yeah.
That's my neighbor. Good to have you.
Well,
Great
she's
job.
way behind right now, but with
I missed him.
a third of the absentees.
To have the right date and signature on your absentee ballot. And naturally, the Democrat operatives, the Democrat people running the election said, no, you don't have to.
I think it's just so great.
All across the state, the process went smoothly. Voters were in and out of their polling places quickly and comfortably. This is one of the marks of a successful election, and it is thanks to the diligent preparation of Republican, Democratic, and Independent clerks who partnered with law enforcement and planned extensively to ensure every
Over here, Mario. They're giving you such a hard time.
I love me to butter jokes.
So good.
You didn't come here.
Hot chocolate. Anybody? Hot chocolate.
The hot cocoa was flowing in the line tonight. As students did their research, perhaps at home.
Mario's having a birthday.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Devin and I have the same, like, we celebrate birthdays.
Very close. Yep, very close. Yep.
Let's see. Spencer, Richard should still have his mic on. Spencer,
Yeah, he was going out there and
right.
change batteries.
And Christy. Mario, did Kim see us? Oh, okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Good seeing you.
Yep.
Decision 2022, all eyes right now on the Michigan governor's race with Republican challenger Tudor Dixon trying to unseat Governor Gretchen Whitmer in a race that is still too early to call. Record-breaking turnout, though, for a midterm election. The results coming into the newsroom, though, we expect it to be a very long night counting votes because so many of them are absentees.
That's right, something that was expected. 1.8 million Michiganders, by the way, voting absentee. So now to some of the other races we're watching closely here. Republican challenger Matthew DePerno trying to unseat Attorney General Dana Nessel. Take a look there. Still very early, but 19% of the precincts reporting Nessel up 52% over DePerno's 46%.
Let's move to the other statewide race, and that's for Secretary of State. Now with about a fifth of the vote in, 21% reporting Jocelyn Benson with a 10-point lead against the Republican Christina Caramo.
Yeah. The entire country watching what happens with Prop 3, which would ensure abortion rights in Michigan if it passes, with 18% of the precincts reporting the yes vote has 56%.
We've got team coverage. Our reporters are all across the state tonight. We're going to begin things here at the 11 o'clock hour at Motor City Casino, where Mara McDonald is live. That is where the Whitmer campaign is this evening. Mara.
Hi, Devin, and the rest of the top of the Democratic ticket, and I will tell you, the joint is jumping. It is packed, and I've been talking to operatives all night, and they will tell you they feel good about what they see so far, but nobody is willing to say anything other than that. The realization is that there are so many votes outstanding. I mean, in Wayne County alone, that nobody is going to be saying anything of any tremendous substance here, probably until tomorrow. My guess is we're going to hear from some of the Dems maybe in another 3 or 4 minutes, but right now everybody is sort of in a holding pattern, but feeling pretty good. We're live downtown at Motor City Casino, and Mara McDonald. Devin, Kimberly, back to you.
Yeah, all right, Mara, thank you. Now let's head to Grand Rapids, where our Grant Herms is live inside the Tudor Dixon election watch party. Tell us what's going on there, Grant.
Kimberly, Devin, good evening. We are going to hear from Tudor Dixon in about 15 minutes here. Her campaign just came around and told all of us here on the press risers that she'll be speaking at 11:15. Enthusiasm has been high here. Some heavy hitters already in the Republican Party mingling out here. Betsy DeVos just entered the ballroom just a little bit ago. Party Chair Ron Weiser has been here for most of the evening, along with several other state senators and representatives, along with Lieutenant Governor candidate here and her running mate for Tudor Dixon, Shane Hernandez, has been here. The thing that they think that this closely parallels is the 2010 race for governor, in which Rick Snyder won by about 10 points, which is a big swing from our latest poll. That'd be about an 18-point pickup for Tudor Dixon, but they think that mirrors that year in 2010 mirrors her campaign this year. A lot of excitement they think that she's been building with this bus tour that she's been doing for the past 2 weeks. This is sort of a homecoming for her, coming back to the west side of the state, separate from the rest of the GOP ticket, which is in Novi this evening. But there's a lot of enthusiasm here, and like I said, we should hear from her in just about 15 minutes or so. Back to you.
Hey, Grant, we appreciate it very much. Well, it's not just the governor's race being closely watched, of course, with Attorney General and Secretary of State also on the ballot.
Rod Maloney following those races tonight. He is live inside the Suburban Collection Showplace in Novi. Rod.
Yeah, good evening, Devin. Good evening, Kimberly. More of a somber mood here because they just announced that all three of the biggest races that they're watching here are the Republicans are behind. This is the Michigan Conservative Coalition that is actually hosting this evening's event here. And Matt DePerno, who is only down where they said by 5 points based on what the latest announcement was, put out a tweet just a little while ago, and it kind of is in stark contrast to what put him on the map by fighting the election in 2020. Here is his tweet. He said, quote, "I know that we're all eagerly awaiting to know who will be Michigan's next Attorney General. We must respect the election process and ensure that every legal ballot is counted. I ask that my supporters remain patient as hardworking election workers complete the count." Now, it was about 2 hours ago that DePerno came in to the ballroom here. And in the early goings, he was much closer in this race. So he came down, shook some hands, and then left without saying anything. We've not heard whether he or Christina Karamo will be talking here at any point soon. But everybody here is saying, look, they're expecting a long night. They expect this to go well into the early morning hours. And so we'll just have to wait and see where all of those big counties that haven't been counted yet come through. Reporting live in Novi, Rod Maloney, back to you.
All right, Rod, it is going to be a late night all over the state, and particularly at Huntington Place, where the absentee ballot counting process in downtown Detroit's underway.
That's right. That's where all the action is. Hank Winchester live inside Huntington Place. Hank, you got an update earlier tonight from Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson.
We did. We spoke with the secretary, and she is very pleased with how things are playing out so far. Now, listen, you mentioned it's going to be a late night, no doubt about it. But the reality is, these votes, they're going to be counted much sooner than we've seen in years past. Take a look at some video from inside the Huntington Place, where it has been nonstop. You know, people working to get these votes in, to get these numbers counted. So far, we're at about 60,000. They anticipate that everything should be done by 4 a.m. Now, when we talk about glitches throughout the state and voting problems, very few. The secretary says a few isolated incidents in the city of Detroit. There was an issue with voter intimidation in the city, and also one case of voter intimidation in Ann Arbor. But overall, the secretary is saying that she is very pleased with how things played out in the state today. Take a listen.
All across the state, the process went smoothly. Voters were in and out of their polling places quickly and comfortably. This is one of the marks of a successful election, and it is thanks to the diligent preparation of Republican, Democratic, and Independent clerks who partnered with law enforcement and planned extensively to ensure every eligible citizen could exercise their right to make their voice heard and hold their elected leaders accountable.
Back out here live at Huntington Place in downtown Detroit, you can see the workers. They're just getting back from a short break. Again, they've got about 60,000 already counted. They hope to have this process completely wrapped up by about 4 a.m. And as you likely remember, a much different scene than what we saw in 2020. Security here is very tight. It is in place, and everyone has one goal: to make sure that your vote is counted. We're live here tonight, downtown. Hank Winchester. Help me, Hank. Back to you.
Yeah. All right, you got it, Hank. One of the more remarkable things we've seen tonight, the long line of students waiting to sign up to vote for the first time, to register to vote.
Really incredible lines here. Tim Pamplin at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, where students are still waiting some, what are we, 3 hours after the polls close.
Yeah, absolutely right. 3 to 6 hours waiting in line for some of these students. For some of these, it's their first time voting. Take a look at some of the video. It's almost a party atmosphere earlier. Take a look.
Hot chocolate. Anybody? Hot chocolate.
The hot cocoa was flowing in the line tonight as students did their research, perhaps their homework. Pizzas were handed out, as were blankets. Some of these students spending up to 6 hours in line to finally reach this place in the museum, the Ann Arbor Clerk's satellite office, where they're registering these students to vote, and then they go just around the corner to cast their ballots.
It's super important to me to be able to kind of vote for what I believe in. So I've been here for 3 hours. I'm excited to get my vote in.
You know, what's important to me is that, I have a say.
I saw the call for blankets as the temperatures are dropping, and I wanted to come down and make sure that no one gets out of line. Everyone needs to vote.
And that's what's happened now. Everybody has now moved inside. This is Eric Peterson here. He's the last person in line. We're going to talk to him in a little bit, have his story tomorrow. But again, long lines out here, people performing their democratic duty here, getting in line to vote, cast their ballots. Every vote here in Ann Arbor will be counted. That's the scene. Back to you guys downtown.
Incredible. Okay, Tim, thank you. Well, our Jason Colthorpe has been tracking the congressional races across the state.
Several competitive races, including one that became one of the most, if not the most expensive nationwide, one of them.
Tens of millions of dollars sunk into this race. The new 7th district, Tom Barrett taking on Alyssa Slotkin. And just to remember, all these districts have been redrawn, so who knows how it's going to go. But let me give you an idea of what it used to look like. Doesn't matter how it turned out, but that's what the old district looked like. Watch how it changed to this one, and this is the new district. Right now, we're looking at about 40% of the estimated vote total. That's an unofficial number, but the precincts, 29% of the precincts are in here, and that's 95 out of 328 so far. And of course, that takes into account several of these areas, including Livingston County right there, where Tom Barrett has a big lead there. But let's zoom it on out. Take a look at some of these other races. The new 6th district, Debbie Dingell, with a third of the vote that's expected, has been counted. She has a sizable lead on Whitney Williams. Let's go to the 8th. That's where this is another one of those races being watched nationally, expected to go right down to the wire. Paul Young, who lost to Alyssa Slotkin in the old 8th last time around, ahead of Dan Kildee right now with almost a third of the expected vote taken there. Let's zoom through a couple more of these. Lisa McClain expected to win this. It's a new district, but the same area basically, over Brian Jay, 64-34. In the 10th, still waiting on a lot of the vote here. Haven't gotten a lot of numbers out of Macomb County tonight just yet. But John James over Carl Marlinga, 57-40 at the moment. In the 11th, it's already been called for Haley Stevens by the AP over Ambrose. So she'll win that new district. This is Rashida Tlaib in this new district. Here's another idea of what it used to look like as we take a look at. Well, let's skip it, but you get the idea. Sizable lead. She's expected to win, and another race we're waiting. Martell Bivings against Sri Tanadar. Tanadar expected to win, but we haven't gotten any votes counted there just yet. We'll keep an eye on this. And as you look at just how the percentages are breaking down in all the big races, you heard Rod Maloney talking about this. 52-46 in governor. For the AG, 51-47. Secretary of State, 54-44. Dems over Republicans right now. That's why things are the way they are at Rod Maloney's place where he is tonight. Guys, back over to you.
Jason, let me quickly mention the Associated Press just calling the 6th district congressional race in Michigan for Debbie Dingell over Whitney Williams. Redistricting changed that district, the shape of that quite a bit, but it didn't change the prospects at all. Would have been a huge surprise had Debbie Dingell lost. The AP calling it for Debbie Dingell to go back to Congress. There were 3 proposals on all the ballots statewide, including Prop 3, which of course would amend the state constitution to make reproductive freedom a right.
Our Karen Drew joins us in the studio with a look at the early results for all 3 of those proposals. Karen.
Yes, let's take a look at those results. Let's start with Proposal 1, and that centers around term limits. It would change the state legislator term limit to 12 total years in the legislature, would require annual public financial disclosure reports by legislators and other state officers. Now, support has grown since earlier this month. Taking a look right now with 16% reporting, with that 65% for Proposal 1. Now, Proposal 2, we're calling it Promoting the Vote. It would actually amend the state constitution to add provisions regarding elections. Right now, that yes vote at 57%, the no at 43%. It would require state-funded absentee ballot drop boxes, also postage for absentee applications and ballots. Now, Prop 2 would definitely provide only election officials could conduct post-election audits. Also would require 9 days of early in-person voting. Now, let's get to Prop 3. So many folks have been turning out to vote solely because of Proposal 3. We saw all those college students at Ann Arbor, many of them waiting for that too. At this point, with 20% reporting, 55% with yes, 45% no. The entire country, guys, watching this one. Michigan, one of 5 states that will vote on an abortion bill in the midterm. A majority of Michigan voters have been showing support for the proposal. The race has gotten tighter over the past couple of weeks. As we have explained before, Prop 3 amends the state constitution to establish an individual right to reproductive freedom, allow the state to regulate abortion after fetal viability, but not prohibit it if medically needed to protect a patient's life or physical or mental health. It seems Prop 1, 2, and 3 following along with what we have predicted so far. But again, Kim and Devin, 20% reporting. We know that this can be a long night. Things can change. But at this point, seems like it's going in the direction that our research has shown. Back to you.
All right. Thanks, Karen.
We'll be updating every local race throughout the night on clickondetroit.com. We'll have a full recap, of course, tomorrow morning on Local 4 News starting at 4:30 a.m. But make sure you stay very dialed in on Click on Detroit.
That's right. We've got much more election coverage here at 11, including Christy McDonald breaking down some of the other key races we're following.
Also, Kim Adams tracking Tropical Storm Nicole. Kim.
Tropical Storm Nicole will become Hurricane Nicole and will affect parts of Florida. Back at home, kids go back to school tomorrow. It'll be a little chilly at the bus stop at 7 a.m., 40 degrees, but by the afternoon, we're in the low 60s. I'll have your weekend forecast in just a few minutes.
All right, Kim. And before we head to break, another look at where things stand right now in the governor's race. Still too early to call, getting close to about a quarter of the vote in. Governor Gretchen Whitmer with a 6-point lead over the Republican Tudor Dixon. Back with more in just a minute. Quickly note that Tudor Dixon, the Republican candidate for governor, may be making some remarks here at any moment. Should she do that, we'll head there live. In the meantime, let's talk with our pollster, Richard Juba, and let's talk about this governor's race. As you can see right now, a 6-point margin for the governor, but what you're looking at is where the vote is coming in, and that's telling to you right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's two places that, frankly, are somewhat startling. We've talked about Oakland County, not just the margins that Governor Whitmer is getting in Oakland County, but the fact that there appears to be a big turnout increase from 2018. That makes her margin even bigger because there's so many more votes for her to
be
get
had.
there.
The other one you're watching is her numbers in Kent County, Grand Rapids.
Yeah, the latest numbers out of Kent County is Governor Whitmer has a 14-point lead in Kent County. This used to be the bastion of the Republican Party. Boy, it's not anymore. That's a startling number if that holds on.
And as much as we talk about redistricting in a lot of races, this is a statewide race. Doesn't really matter here. Let's talk about what's going on in Proposal 3 tonight. Prop 3, the abortion question. This is very close to where it was polling in our most recent poll. We had it at, I think you had it at exactly 55% a little over a week ago. What are you seeing so far in where these numbers are taking us?
Well,
this with about a fifth of the vote in.
You know, in our discussions, we thought that Prop 3 was going to settle in on a number. And I'm going to be interested to see if that continues. But, you know, the governor's race and Prop 3 are tied together, and we're seeing the numbers consistent to what we expected.
What we don't know, which will be such a great drill down once we get all the numbers in, is exactly what Prop 3 has done to so many other races, because as you and I have been talking all night, the lines that we've been seeing in Ann Arbor, almost, I don't want to say exclusively Prop 3, but let's say it's a pretty strong push for the college students that are getting out there to register to vote on Election Day.
For Prop 3 to do well, they needed young voters. It appears they're getting young voters. And that is benefiting the Democratic Party right now to see those young voters all lined up.
The last thing that I wanted to make sure that we address, and we've talked about the red mirage. We're not really seeing what we would call a red mirage, but we need to be mindful that the last third of the vote that's going to come in, or even more than a third, is going to be a tilt Democratic, because that's where the absentee ballots are.
Yeah, we appear to be seeing some of the absentees already coming in out of
Oakland County, certainly, yes.
But we don't know where the absentees are in other counties. Yeah. And, you know, I expected this race to be much closer at this point in the evening because those early Election Day votes are Republican voters. May not be a very good sign for the Republicans if they are not closer here and those absentees come pouring in. And we know from the polling, those are largely Democratic votes.
Yeah. Richard, thanks so much. We will keep you close by. Let's find out what's going on outside tonight with Kim and Kimberly.
Very good. Devin, thank you. Our Kim Adams been tracking this tropical storm Nicole. The storm is a potential to impact a lot of people in not only Florida, but also the Carolinas as well.
Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, and unfortunately, a tropical storm watch was just issued for Fort Myers Beach up into the Tampa area, right where they had Hurricane Ian. It just has a massive wind field. I will show you that in just a moment. Right now, let's enjoy our weather, which is beautiful. It does get cold at night once that sun sets, and it sets earlier and earlier every day. Today, the sunset was at 5:19, tomorrow at 5:17, 44 in Detroit, 40 in Howell, 41 in Pontiac. The weather story, it is going to be beautiful tomorrow and Thursday. Enjoy those 2 days, because after that we see some pretty big changes. Gusty winds this weekend, the possibility of a rain-snow mix, and temperature highs only in the 40s. So where we are right now is as high as our temps will get all weekend long. So it is going to be very, very cold. Look at this temperature trend. In fact, normals are in the 50s. We will be 69 for Thursday, 64 Friday, and only 43 for a high on Saturday. All eyes right now on Tropical Storm Nicole. It was subtropical yesterday. This morning it became an official tropical storm. It has winds at 70 miles per hour. It just has to go a little bit more to get to those 74 mile per hour winds, making a Cat 1 hurricane, expected to make landfall sometime overnight, Wednesday night into Thursday. Now it's taking it a little north. The latest track takes it closer to the Orlando area, and then it also affects parts of the Gulf Coast with tropical storm force winds, slides up through parts of the Carolinas and the East Coast. Back at home, though, we've got temperatures in the 40s for the most part in the morning, and then warming up into the 60s, but the extended forecast looks amazing. 62 tomorrow, lots of sunshine. Future forecast, again, cold for the weekend. 64 Friday, 43 Saturday, only 39 for Sunday.
Okay, Kim, thank you. Coming up next, Christy McDonald will join us with some of the other big national races that we're following. Stay with us.